Ramon, what is your understanding of papal primacy historically?
First among bishops,
Okay.
or first among equals. Sorry,
Do you
not
have second
bishops.
monitor?
Yeah. No, I only have one.
Okay. Can you, on your one monitor, look up? Well, I will find it for you, okay?
Yeah.
Because I have the bookmark. Theology, papal authority,
What was it?
canons of the
Joseph's
Council of
book on it.
Nicea. All right, so here is the relevant doctrine, okay? Canon
Hmm.
number 6. Would you like to read it to us?
Yeah, sure. Let me just pull it up. Oh, what what link am I clicking?
Side chat,
These.
Christian history, Council of Nicaea.
No, I know, but which link on the page? Like these
Canon number
these
6.
canons are found in.
We're looking for
Oh, it's on the
canon number
bottom.
6.
Yeah. Let the ancient customs in Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis prevail. Let the Bishop of Alexandria have jurisdiction in all these, since the like is customary for the Bishop of Rome also. Likewise in Antioch and other provinces, that the churches retain their privileges. And this is to be universally understood that if anyone be made bishop without the consent of the metropolitan, the Great Synod has declared that such a man ought not to be bishop. If, however, two or three bishops shall from natural love of contradiction oppose the common suffrage of the rest, it being reasonable and in accordance with the ecclesiastical law, then let the choice of the majority prevail.
So, from the plain reading of the text, what kind of interpretations can you offer?
um, uh, oh, yeah, people use this canon to argue that um, against the notion or belief that uh, the See of Rome has jurisdiction over all, or in other words, has universal jurisdiction, because according to this canon, um, each see is only to retain their powers in their respective jurisdictions and not encroach on others.
Where does it say all of those things that you're what your qualifying statements are?
Um, uh, Hold on. Let the churches retain their privileges.
Where does it say this?
Likewise, in Antioch and other provinces, let the churches retain their privileges. So it's the latter of that sentence.
Correct. But what is the
Yeah.
first sentence?
Let the ancient customs in Egypt, Libya, and Pontopolis prevail. That the Bishop of Alexandria have jurisdiction in all these, since the like is customary for the Bishop of Rome also.
Okay. So, what is your interpretation then of jurisdiction and customary? And what is customary to a bishop of Rome? Because I am aware, right? There are
Yeah.
ways of interpreting Canon 6 from the plain reading, right? Eastern Orthodox bros tend to have their own interpretation, and the Roman Church has also held its own interpretation. But this is
Okay.
just an exercise in, right, how we can come to an interpretation of the possible interpretations that don't fall into a logical fallacy. How would we do
Was
this?
interpreting this canon in the context of the time.
Uh,
I
the
mean, that's how it's
condition is right,
usually
right, right.
done.
So,
Yeah.
so, so here's the thing. There are obviously historical um, circumstances, okay, leading up to the council that's going to give a reason why the canon had to address this particular issue, right?
Hmm.
Um, that is not part of the plain reading of the text.
Well,
It more has to
I
if
meant, yeah. Sorry, sorry.
because Eastern Orthodox could do this too, right?
Yeah.
And in both cases where you would try to supply or make an argument for how it should be interpreted, based on references to, you know, historical facts is going to be analogical, right?
Hmm.
Then you can run into epistemological problems, right? Or epistemological conflicts. So if one claims that they have a way of establishing history different from the other person, different from another person, then one might not agree on the set as facts that could set the context just on the grounding of those facts themselves, right?
Hmm.
Okay, that's why I was like, what is a possible interpretation? What are the possible interpretations just from the plain reading of the text? Because the canons are not necessarily established by the historical context by which the canon is declared,
Yep, of course. No.
right? Okay.
Um, yeah. So that the seas, um, that the seas are maintaining certain customs, and that this is a reestablishment or reinforcement of such a thing. And um, when there's a disagreement among bishops, that this be resolved in a democratic manner in accordance with
Okay, so where are the
the
words
Orthodox.
democratic? Where is system of appeal and democracy? Where are you finding this in the tank in the text?
Then let the choice of the majority prevail.
In the case of what?
In the case of a disagreement,
Okay. As it pertains
opposed to
to
common
their
suffrage. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So like the reason why this is important, right?
yeah.
Part of this exercise is because without drawing lines, right? One can't assume that they're just a Catholic, right?
Hmm.
If we're going to start to cover topics like papal authority and talk about papal authority as a definitive doctrine, then we're going to have to engage in justification, all right? So that's kind of what you you're almost committed to doing this once you start talking about canon number 6. Okay? So that's the grounds of it, all right? So,
Okay.
because before in that earlier conversation that I was having with Fox, remember, I
Hmm.
clarified him that at least, right, we can agree that someone doesn't need to know, right, all the juridical context in order to accept papal authority, right, and still be considered a Catholic. But once we start talking about canon number 6, then we're kind of committed to the view of trying to justify our beliefs for how to interpret canon number 6, correct? Correct.
Yeah, if you endeavor into the conversation, yeah.
Da
Okay.
da da
So
da 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 da.
let's take it back a little bit, okay? So first it recognizes the ancient customs, right?
Hmm.
What does it presuppose that they were just customs and not a juridical authority on themselves? Well, I already kind of gave you the answer there. What does it
Sorry.
presuppose that they were just merely an ancient custom?
What what presupposes that they were just ancient customs and
Right.
not.
What does it mean that they were an ancient custom
Oh yeah, I don't know.
according to the Council of Nicaea?
That's why I was going to say like a clarification of terms is needed.
Okay. So from the
Yeah.
plain reading of the text,
Hmm.
if it's referred to as an ancient custom, it means that there is no jurisdiction for them. It's just a custom,
Okay.
right?
So
Because it could be logically assumed that if there was a jurisdiction, like an established jurisdiction of the ancient custom, there would be no need to address it in a canon. Wouldn't you say? This is pretty basic.
um, yeah, so there wouldn't be need for a clarification. Yeah.
So, so you can see how from the plain reading of the text, there are things we can presuppose about it that could provide an interpretation without having to appeal to historical context, right?
Yeah.
One of these is if we're to maintain this reference to ancient customs as it is codified in the canon number 6, we could, by rule of inference, right, excluded middle of that historical context, and from the premises alone, conclude that ancient customs, as it applied to Egypt, Libya, and Pentopolis, did not have jurisdiction. Correct?
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. Yeah.
Okay. So consider. Okay. So the next point, right? So now that we established kind of like the primary. Okay. So why is there nothing said? Right. Right. So we've established that through rule of inference, right, from the plain reading of the text. Well, we can establish of by what is presupposed by ancient customs is that they didn't have jurisdiction, right? Why is what is customary for the Bishop of Rome? Why is the juridical authority of that or the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Rome not mentioned here?
Because it already exists.
Presumably it would, right?
Yeah.
Do you, do you see kind of what I'm trying to tease out here?
That the jurisdiction of Rome over all things had already existed by the Council of Nicaea because it's alluded to in this canon.
Um, very close. So the logic goes like this, okay? Which is
Yeah.
they're appealing to what is customary for the Bishop of Rome, okay? But they don't include what the jurisdictional aspects of Rome is.
No. Yeah.
So would presumably, right? And what we're gonna call this, right? Even though it's not named in the document, is what would by historical circumstance be established as papal primacy. Okay? But again, that is the historical context which still has to be justified outside of the plain reading of the text. Okay? But
Mhm.
that is what is being presupposed in the appeal to what is customary for the Bishop of Rome. And the question of the what in this case would be jurisdiction. Correct?
Yeah.
So, what is presupposed if in fact it is papal primacy? And this is, and the Greek Orthodox do not have an issue with this. What is being presupposed about papal primacy cannot be understood as anything other than the jurisdiction of papal primacy. Wouldn't you say?
Um. Yeah, I would say yes, basing it upon this canon. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just gonna read a bunch of word salad now, okay? Because I
Okay.
I was hoping I was hoping that we could just kind of like do like a logical breakdown because Greek Orthodox, what they like to do is they like to use this as a case for saying, you see here, Alexandria and Antioch, because at that time it was only a tetrarchy, okay? Pentarchy doesn't come to like 700s, all right? Where they start adding Constantinople and I forgot what the other church is. Um,
Jerusalem.
yes, Jerusalem. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two don't get established till like 700 or something.
Hmm.
What Greek Orthodox and some Protestants, only some of them, what they like to say is they say, hey, canon number 6, here you go. Here's a document where literally at the First Ecumenical Council, they're saying that Alexandria and Antioch all have their own jurisdictions equal to Rome. But is that what it's saying?
Hmm. Wait, can I ask you a question about this though?
Sure.
Like, and the reason why I want to ask you a question like in the middle of you saying something is because it's relevant to one of the responses of this.
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, so like I don't know if you remember, you probably do because I mentioned it a few times, but there's like this other server called Papacy Hub where People ask questions. They have a lot of questions about stuff like this, and this is a commonly asked question.
Hmm.
Um, they ask, "Well, what do we do about Canon 6?" And rather than taking a logical methodology approach, such as yours, the usual answer in response to this is adducing, or in other words, citing St. Maximus the Confessor,
Right.
stating that the Roman Church is not bounded by any canon.
Hmm.
So,
But according to
um,
the Eastern Orthodox paradigm, they're going to reject that because they're going to appeal
mhm.
to some epistemological grounding for consensus of the fathers or some this or that, and then they're going to claim Maximus the Confessor, you know, doesn't really what he has to say doesn't establish universal authority in an infallible way. So they're just going to start to gish gallop.
Okay,
But
okay.
do you see how appealing to Maximus still though? Because we already established, right? Once we start appealing to historical facts outside of the plain reading of the text, we're no longer talking about the actual text itself, and we're talking about interpretations of history, right? It still doesn't
Uh,
address, right, the logical
mhm,
assumptions that are clear from the plain reading. It can kind
mhm.
of seem a little bit autistic, but you know, it's pretty clear that there are certain things like it's put like this, right? Like there are known knowns, there's unknown unknowns, and there's unknown knowns. You ever heard this phrase?
I've not.
Okay.
No.
So I'm going to provide you. This is now this is not going to be my work because what I was trying to do for even for myself and trying to because I know like you already said your strength isn't like papal authority and ecclesiology, right? It's
No.
that's not my
No.
strength also, okay? Because
Mhm.
again, that's gonna involve the whole study of like the canons, the ecumenical councils, the documents, the letters, and the church fathers and some of the saints. Okay, that's not
Yeah.
my strength. That's not my expertise. It's not your expertise. That's why like I wanted to start with the canon first. Okay, all right. And we've already kind of established here, right? In one sense, the canon is establishing the jurisdictional quote unquote rights that Bishop of Alexandria and Antioch have, but they're referencing and appealing to what is customary in Rome, but they don't mention the jurisdiction of Rome. Okay?
Mhm.
So it is
Yeah.
logical to assume that the jurisdiction of Rome is already presupposed in the appeal.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. So now we're just going to go through commentary, okay? First,
Okay.
considered grammatically, the canon says nothing about jurisdiction in reference to the Bishop of Rome. Thus, the idea that Alexandria governs Egypt and Libya while the Bishop of Rome governs some Roman land like Italy is read into the canon, effectively putting words into the council's mouth. This does not prove the Roman primacy, but it does help to remind us that this canon does not deny a Roman primacy either, since no Roman territory is explicitly mentioned. That's what we were just discussing, right?
Yeah.
Second, considering the logic of the canon, an interpretation that renders the canon something to the effect, quote, let the Bishop of Alexandria rule Egypt since it is customary for the Bishop of Rome to rule Italy. This is a non sequitur fallacy.
O-
So
Okay.
if one
Um.
were to try to provide an interpretation that reads like what I just posted in the side chat, let the Bishop of Alexandria rule Egypt since it is customary for the Bishop of Rome to rule Italy. It's a non sequitur, right? Because we acknowledged that the appeal to what is customary of Rome is not mentioned, correct?
Mhm.
But logically, by rule of inference, or excuse me, by law of excluded middle, right? The rule of inference here, what the operative rule of inference is that the jurisdiction of Rome is already assumed, right? It just doesn't give us any further clarification than that. if we're going to be conservative about it, without again
Yeah.
appealing to the historical circumstances so far. In other words, it is irrelevant if the Bishop of Rome governs Italy, since that says nothing about who should rule elsewhere and especially what land they should govern. The same can be said if it is taken to mean, quote, since it is customary for the Bishop of Rome to be a patriarch, which brings out the logical fallacy all the more. So let's say instead of providing an interpretation that says that since it is customary for the Bishop of Rome to rule Italy, someone provides a different one and says since it is customary for the Bishop of Rome to be a patriarch. For a council that just got done addressing one of the most pernicious heresies of all time, including using precise and deliberate language for the creed, we should expect a far more reasonable argument in Canon 6 than what Protestants and Eastern Orthodox has to offer. If Canon
Mm,
6 excludes some kind of territory of Italy over which Rome has primacy, what is the correct interpretation? The Catholic interpretation understands the canon to mean something like, quote, let this council recognize the Alexandrian jurisdiction over Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis, since the like has already been recognized by the Bishop of Rome. Understood this, so I'll post this, okay?
okay.
So this interpretation, this last one, seems to be more logically coherent than the other two, and it doesn't make an appeal to a non sequitur. Understood this way, Canon 6 is no longer a non sequitur. This canon now has some teeth. The appeal of the Nicene Council is to an ancient custom which surely must have originated on some solid basis. For example, not accepted simply because it's old. And this basis is none other than the affirmation of the Bishop of Rome. Without question, only the Catholic interpretation of this canon satisfies the intellect and confirms the faith, especially when we look at the context of the canons of the councils immediately following Nicea, which sought to expound upon canon number 6.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not going to
Okay.
go into the stuff about Council of Constantinople yet, because now we're going to go to. Did you watch Erick Ybarra and Dyer kind of have like an unscripted debate on this?
um, I was going. Well, I watched like small portions of the Ubi Petrus debate, which just happened recently between
Right.
Ybarra.
Yeah.
Uh,
We can
but
go through that
no, not
again
the
as
J
well.
Tire one.
Because I'm glad
No.
you watched that one because that's what I meant by we're going to focus the
Oh,
next
I
2 weeks on this
no
issue.
no no
And it would be nice if you
no.
could.
I didn't
So
watch
good.
it in its entirety. No,
Have you ever seen
no.
Canon 6 presented in this
I just
way?
want to make that clear.
What? That you haven't watched the whole thing?
Yeah.
That's fine. No, 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 no. Okay, then
Um.
that's great. We'll watch it together.
Yeah.
Um, have
Okay.
you ever had Canon 6 presented in this way? What are your
In the way
thoughts?
you
That's what I'm
presented
asking
it.
for. Yeah, well, I mean, this is not. I didn't come up with this.
Um. Well, it's surprising. Because normally everyone says it just doesn't apply, which
What
that's
doesn't apply?
sufficient just to be dismissive of it. Because these are the canon because this,
You're cutting in and
um,
out.
which I thought was fine. I don't.
You're cutting in and out.
Um, okay. Hold
Are you there?
on.
Hello?
Yeah. Just give me a second.
Yeah, your internet's
Hello.
really bad.
Can you hear me fine now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Normally, when people ask about any canon, um, but specifically this one, uh, like normally they're just dismissive regarding it. Or in other words, they either bring up Saint Maximus, or they just say this canon is not binding today because XYZ. It's due to some historical reason. Um, so it's rare that anyone actually engages with the content of the canon or tries to sufficiently or thoroughly explain it. So, no.
So
So again, I just thought it was surprising. That's all.
my thesis on canon number 6 is I'm not willing to let the Eastern Orthodox and Protestant get away with it that easy. Because just from an internal critique of the canon itself is sufficient enough to demonstrate that their interpretations are forms of informal fallacy. And the one that maintains that the possibility for juridical acceptance at the Council of Nicaea for the other two could only be maintained if you maintain de jure and not de facto that the Bishop of Rome already had those privileges jurisdictionally. Because that's the appeal that's
Mm.
precisely being made to the Bishop of Rome. The appeal is literally being made without having been spoken, which is a stronger claim when it doesn't have to be mentioned, right? It's
Yeah.
stronger it's stronger because the appeal is to papal primacy as it is assumed as operative prior to the Council of Nicaea. The only the only precise interpretation that there could be to explain, right, the ambiguity of Canon 6 is only the third interpretation. Let this council recognize the Alexandrian jurisdiction over Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis, since the like has already been recognized by the Bishop of Rome, right? The appeal is
Yeah.
being specifically made to what is customary in Rome because it is already assumed that Rome itself, the jurisdiction of Rome, is what recognizes the customs of both Alexandria and of Antioch. And that is what is to be universally understood, right?
Hmm.
So now that we have that, we're gonna go to Mike Ybarra. So, because this is where Jay Dyer steps in. This is why it becomes critically important. Okay,
Hmm.
because what you're gonna find is that when Eastern Orthodox make this argument, they don't even stick to their interpretation of Canon 6. They usually will bring it up to launch the conversation about papal authority, about the ambiguity of it, but they won't offer you an interpretation because the more intellectually honest of them are gonna already know the problems that are inherent from the internal critique of Canon 6. You get what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And instead, what guys like what the Dyerites do is they will try to conflate universal jurisdiction with papal infallibility, and then they will strawman our position on papal primacy by conflating and claim like they project right their thesis, their presupposition onto us as that is the only Roman Catholic understanding. What I mean by that is he's gonna accuse Erick Ybarra of and all other papists of reading Vatican I into papal primacy.
Hmm.
So here we go. Hold on, let me set this YouTube up. All right, here we go.
Intervene on a disciplinary matter in the East. And the bishops from the East there, the spokesman, because the legate spoke Latin, right? So in this council, you had the Latins were speaking, and then the Greeks somebody had to translate it, then the Greeks had to respond. Theodore of Balsamon, I want to say, is the man who was Greek who knew Latin, and he responded saying that the Council of Constantinople admits that Rome has this right. So none of that really infringes upon the rights of the first see. But I think where he might want to, I think where this questioner is coming from is basically, you have 4 other patriarchates, for goodness sake. If Rome falls into heresy, then we've got 4 other ones. Well, if that is true, then that is true, But we'd have to look at the evidence for that.
All right. Well, Eric, we have Jay on. Jay, how are you? Welcome back to the show.
Good. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you a chance to maybe interact with Eric, but I want to make sure that it's structured, that y'all get even time. Would it be okay that maybe I don't know if y'all want to do maybe just a back and forth free for all, or do y'all want to maybe do something that's timed?
No, I don't care. This is not a
okay.
moderated.
Okay, so we can do maybe a moderated debate another time. Why don't y'all just do a free for all, back and forth chat in that case?
Well, one thing I would say is that initially listening to what Eric's saying about the Canon 6 of Nicea first, and then I want to talk about the pre-Vatican II papal encyclicals, which I've read extensively. I have a lot of familiarity with that. But first thing I would say is that if you look at Canon 6 of Nicea, it's correct. It is talking about the Pope's regional jurisdiction. Now, what Eric seems to do was to assume that we all know that it was just assumed that his universal jurisdiction was already understood. But in fact, if you read the canon, the only statement that gives universality there is the council saying that the universal limitations are to be in effect. So it's very odd that this canon would speak this way, and we're just supposed to assume that it was understood.
Do you see what he just did there, Ramon?
Yes, yeah. Well,
so which interpretation of Canon 6 is he providing?
The regional one?
Yep. And do you see how that's a non sequitur?
Yeah.
But he's very clever about the way he's going to go about this, okay? I've already typed out everything that he says here, so I will retype so you can see J. Dyer's position, and we'll review it afterwards. Who's asking a question? Was it you, Infallibility, or Grudgin?
Oh, yeah. Now that you're playing this, it'll answer my question. I was going to just ask, what is the issue with Vatican II?
Got it. That's the Dyerite position.
That it was universal in terms of his, not just local, but also his primacy over the entire church throughout the world, right? And again, I'm stressing that it likens the jurisdiction locally to the other patriarchates, and then it specifically states that the only this.
Do you see he doubles down on it, Ramon?
Yeah.
Is to be understood universally. So the limitation is what's universal, and what Eric and most of the papal apologists do.
The limitation, the territorial limitation, is what J. Dyer is arguing.
What's amazing about that is that Eric himself
is what is
universal.
There's
an evolution of this understanding when he talks about baptism of desire. I agree with him that in the Roman Catholic theology there is an evolution of this doctrine. That's literally how Roman Catholicism has defended the doctrine of the papacy, is because it's a seed. I think Newman talks about it this way, that grows into an entire tree of understanding. That's not the Orthodox doctrine. The Orthodox doctrine is that theology has always remained the same from the time of the apostles, and it gets explicated in a more precise way. So what those councils, the Sixth Council, whatever it is, what they're teaching, it's not a new doctrine. It's not an evolution of understanding. It's the exact same doctrines that are just made more precise. That's why the words like hypostasis, energeia, they're not from Aristotle. Aristotle might have used those terms, but they're actually from the Greek.
It's a misunderstanding of development of doctrine.
What's that?
That's a misunderstanding of development of doctrine.
Right.
Second Vatican Council stuff that he's talking about, that Lumen Gentium and Dignitatis Humanae and all these different documents of Vatican II are perfectly in line with the traditional teaching because the understanding has evolved. And he then tries to defend the idea that the saying that Islam has the same God as Christianity can be defended on the basis of baptism of desire. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous. That's how far the baptism of desire nonsense has gone to defend everything that was in previous Vatican II statements to completely contradict that. For example, if you look at Mortalium Animos, which is Pius XI's encyclical on pan-religious ceremonies, it says that this is an action of apostasy that promotes indifferentism. Nobody can deny that a CC1 and a CC2 of John Paul and then Ratzinger have promoted this indifferentism. Nobody can actually honestly read the apostolic canons and the canons of the Sixth and Seventh Council that forbid praying in synagogues or in heretical sects in their services, and then say that the actions of these men are not promoting indifferentism or participation in that. Now, I can definitely prove to you that in all traditional moral theology, in the Roman system, if you participate in those actions, you're participating in sin, you're participating in apostasy. And in Roman Catholic canon law, it's very clear, even in the new code of canon law, you incur an ipso facto excommunication when you participate in actions of schism, heresy, and apostasy. There's other sins too, like procuring an abortion, that procures a late sententiae ipso facto excommunication. Now, it's true that in Roman Catholic theology, the Pope, you can debate whether that can be the case with the Pope, right? Because that's the whole nature of that system, is that after Vatican I, no one can judge the first see. So the Pope can do these things because no one can judge the first see, even though ironically he can commit actions that even Aquinas says in the Summa. Aquinas says in one of the replies, if someone were to pray at the tomb of Muhammad, he would be considered an apostate. And nobody can deny that Pope Urban II calling the Crusades against Islam, and now we have a Pope praying in mosques, the Blue Mosque towards Mecca. Those are actions of apostasy. There's no way to defend that. The only way to defend that is to come back by saying, well, these are just sins of the Pope, and we all know that popes can sin. The answer is no. It's not just a matter of sins; it's a matter of heresy,
Hello.
apostasy, and schism. Those are specific sins that
Hold on,
remove
we're in the
one from the
middle.
body of Christ.
Oh, sorry.
Ancient canons are explicit that you can't participate in the services of open, bald-faced heretics.
Wow, there's a lot there.
Yeah, hey, there's a lot there. Yeah,
So, Ramon, just for your review, I'm gonna now post his Jay Dyer's main argument, so you can have it handy with you while we go the rest of this. Okay.
Okay.
Jay Dyer nonsense. Here we go. All right. This is exactly what he said, and then he started to gish gallop. Okay.
Eric, go ahead and jump in here, and let's get some interaction.
Okay. So let's get back to Canon 6 of Nicea. You know, Jay makes the point that this is the only universal idea here is that there's limited jurisdictions, and that we need to rely on a seed to tree transition in order to get to the papacy. But as I was saying at the beginning, we only have 15 years after this, where the very president of the Council of Nicea, Osius of Cordoba, was presiding at the Council of Serdica. Now, as Jay knows, I'm sure he knows, the Council of Serdica was a response to a papal overturn of the deposition of Athanasius, Paul of Constantinople, Marcellus of Ancyra, and two other Eastern bishops who were deposed by the semi-closely Arian bishops of the East, who were led by Eusebius of Nicomedia. So at the Council of Tyre, however you want to pronounce it, in 335, and at the Council of Jerusalem at the same year, Athanasius and four other bishops were deposed. Those bishops were called to the Roman See, and after Pope Julius had examined their confession, he wrote letters overturning the decisions of the Eastern See, of the Eastern Council, and provided them letters restoring them to their position as bishops. Now, what does that tell us? That could just mean that, hey, Rome's the only Orthodox church at the time. Rome was willing to help. Rome puts in her 2 cents. Hey, it could mean that. But we have contemporary historians who, well, they're not exactly contemporary, but they're only 1 century later. They're not into the post-schism, epistemologically scholastic gluttonous people. We're talking about Theodoret of Cyrus, who's a Greek historian. I know he came under a dark cloud, but he was a historian. You have Socrates, who's a Greek lawyer and a historian who was living in Constantinople in 445. You have Sozomen, who's also a Greek historian living in Constantinople at the time. And I could read for you how they understood this whole interaction with Athanasius, Julius, and the Eastern bishops. Theodoret says, this is how Socrates summarized Athanasius's restoration. He says, quote, "There, each bishop from the East laid his case before Julius, Bishop of Rome, who sent them back again into the East, restoring them to their respective sees by virtue of his letters, in the exercise of the Church of Rome's particular privilege, and at the same time in the liberty of that prerogative, sharply rebuking those by whom they had been deposed."
Yeah.
Quote. Hold on a second. So before we were hearing that Rome's locked down to Rome. Alexandria's locked down to the provinces under Alexandria.
No.
Antioch's locked down to those seas. And what we
this
have
is I'm sorry, this is ridiculous. By saying that somebody has a local jurisdiction, that does not mean that people don't make appeals to outside those jurisdictions. This is common in the history of the church. This is well known.
Okay, well, but let me go on. I'll give you Sozomen's understanding here. He says, so the Roman bishop, on learning the accusations against each individual and on finding that they held the same sentiments about the Nicene dogmas, admitted them to communion as of like orthodoxy, and as the case for all was fitting to the dignity of his see. As the case for all was fitting to the dignity of his see, he restored them all to their own churches. Now, we know that this was an exercise of jurisdiction. How? Because the Eusebian bishops wrote back and said, you can't do that. And they cited the canons of Nicea to try and show that Pope Julius could not do that. So we have a few options here. We could say, yeah, this is just, Rome's just one of those orthodoxies that, they were like the Mike Tyson of the time, and they had really good influence, and we could get there and we get them to write a letter and we can go back to the East and yeah. Or there's some legal right here that's being appealed to that has prior precedent.
Yeah, Eric, the legal right is what comes out of the synods and the honor that's given to the first see. If you are familiar, for example,
what synod gave this to the Roman see?
No, I'm saying that over time, that understanding is given to the first see, right?
Right, but we're talking about this at this moment in time.
The appellate structure is fine. I've never heard an Orthodox person disagree with that idea. Let me give you an example from Orthodox ecclesiology, right? So in the Russian Orthodox Church in America, we have the first hierarch, right? His name's Metropolitan Hilarion. He's the first hierarch of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia in North America, right? So if there was an
Bisma, I
issue,
think
he
you can
has a
stop it
place of
there.
venerated authority.
Okay.
I mean, I thought Erick Ybarra's response was sufficient in determining why, or in determining how and why, that interpretation of the Council of Nicaea's specific Canon 6
Right,
is not
by the
sufficient.
subsequent canon, correct.
Yeah.
But the problem with
Yeah.
Sardica is it's a local canon, and that's why Dyer and the Dyerites are going to maintain, right? They're going to have like an esoteric an appeal to their epistemology over ours. So from their point of view, they're not going to accept, right, like anything other than an ecumenical council that is going to um, I guess acknowledge that particular interpretation of the Council of Nicaea as it's clearly stated at the Council of Sardica. If it's anything other than an ecumenical council that interprets Nicaea to be the case, which they claim they don't find that to be the case, then they won't accept Sardica as an authoritative interpretation of Council of Nicaea. Now you get it. So
Can't someone just go to Pope Saint Agatha though?
from what's that?
Can't someone just go to Pope Saint Agatha?
So here we go. Well, I mean, they're going to cover all of that. And what you're going to find in this interchange, right? In Ybarra, if I have one criticism of him, is he didn't stick to Canon 6 either. Because Ybarra, he's going where Jay Dyer is leading the conversation. Grant you, this is an impromptu debate, okay? What happened is they were having a conversation on Michael Lofton's like stream, right, about Canon number 6, right? Then Jay Dyer started typing furiously in the side chat, and then they just had him show up. They set up the live stream really fast, and then they just turned it into like an impromptu discussion, which then turned into a debate, right? But the reason why we went through Canon number 6 by ourselves first is to show you where, if we take the plain reading of the text itself, there are stronger interpretations of just Canon number 6 than the others. That's why, because I understand, like I've done I've gone through a cursory, study myself of like the ecclesiology around, the first 7 ecumenical councils and what it has to say on like papacy and what was operative and what wasn't. Okay. And so, like, I do agree with you. From our point of view, it is pretty sufficient when you look at the prior, when you look at the prior.
What?
I think he glitched out.
Bisma.
No, yeah. So I agree with you that when we look at the succeeding councils, right, we can see instances where it corroborates and it supports our interpretation of Nicaea 1. Okay, whether they're ecumenical or recognized, in letters between the popes or even the saints or Maximus the Confessor's own letters, we can all see this, right? But the problem that the Dyerites are maintaining only after, right? Only after they strawman our position by force feeding an interpretation of Canon number 6. That's why I stopped it there, right? What is Jay Dyer's position? His position that it is understood in a territorial way. That's a non sequitur. Now, do you see what I'm not? Do you kind of see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
The kind of underhandedness of this. If you let them get away with an inch, they're going to take a mile, and that's what you're going to see Jay Dyer do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to continue the video, or do you have any other discussions?
I might have to go eat soon.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
yeah, well, I'm still gonna stay in the VC for the meantime, but I just want to let you know.
Okay. We will continue.
Right? But he has no more bishopric than anybody else. But he does have a position of first hierarch, and it is a venerated thing. It is a powerful position. And in the same way that the Patriarch of Moscow has a very powerful position. But at the same time, that doesn't
Oh
mean
wait,
that
I do have a
outside the
question
norms of
though.
canon law, that he operates in some kind of special Davino. It's
Abysmal.
custom, right? That's what Canon 6 of Nicea appeals to, is custom. It's not an appellate to what is Davine in our view, right? So absolutely, there is a long history of Rome being Orthodox, and nobody denies that. I mean, I'm very thankful that St. Maximus can appeal to Rome, that St. Athanasius can appeal to Rome. But if you read the letters of St. Athanasius, you will see many instances where appeals and issues are made to him as the Pope of Alexandria. That was his title. That's still a title of the Alexandrian Patriarchate, because the ecumenical councils gave the Alexandrian Patriarchate the title Pope. And in the same way, that's our view of the Roman system in the placement of the councils, is that it did occupy the first place, because nobody denies that Peter occupies the first place. But here's the thing: occupying the first place and having a canonical appellate system in no way, in our view, justifies the later accruing and evolution.
Do you see this? So he agrees, and Erick Ybarra is going to call him out on this. He agrees that they even recognize the primacy of Peter in an appellate sense, in that jurisdictional sense, but yet, right, the reason why they disagree is because according to their own epistemology, their own worldview.
Their own dogma, correct?
Right, but as pointed out earlier, their worldview is based on a logically fallacious interpretation of Canon number 6.
To where he alone sits in judgment upon all theological matters and make pronouncements ex cathedra, and he alone is given the charism of infallibility. That's the problem here, is that you can say all of these things that we would agree with, and you can try to reinterpret them. But I would just say, even Ratzinger in Introduction to Christianity, he says very clearly that there needs to be a tempering of the view of Vatican I, because the Orthodox perspective on synodal government was the perspective of the church in the first millennium. Ratzinger admits that in Introduction to Christianity, the supposed bastion of conservatism. Yes, he does. He absolutely does. That's exactly what he says. I can read you the quote. You want me to read them?
Well, we can get to that. I wrote a whole article on that, but I'd like to get back to what I was saying here with the Council of Nicea.
Okay, but see, what I want to show is that throughout the discussion that I've heard, I've listened to the whole show, what you've done is essentially read back into these ancient statements, the Vatican I view, but you've also admitted that there's this evolution of dogma. And so just as there's an evolution of dogma that you admit about baptism of desire, backing up the idea that the Pope can
Oh,
never
he's all over the place. You can't
He's
do this.
nervous. He's nervous. That's what
But-
you hear in his voice.
But do you see why he would start gish galloping like this? Because he's
Yes.
working off of
Yeah,
a logical
no, of
fallacy, Ramon.
course.
Yeah. That's why it's important to
Yeah.
identify where that can happen in someone's interpretation of Canon 6. It leads to this. But if you had no if you didn't know of Canon 6 and you didn't logically break it down, you can see how, whether you're a Catholic or a non-Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox, if you heard someone like J. Dyer start making those arguments, it could potentially make sense from their worldview, right?
Yeah.
But it's something that doesn't logically follow from the most reasonable interpretation of Canon number 6.
So he basically just dunks on ignorance, correct?
Pretty much, Luke. Yeah.
Same way, we are saying there's an evolution of dogma when it comes to the idea of the first see. Look at the way Catholic apologists will cite Irenaeus when he talks about why the Rome is the first see. He says because it's Peter and Paul. He doesn't mention anything about a special promise to Peter. He doesn't mention anything about infallibility. He says it's the doubly apostolic see, Peter and Paul. That's why every Orthodox icon has Peter and Paul holding the church, right? Because
I get annoyed too when I hear people apologists appealing to Irenaeus. But I'm going back to this issue about Canon 6, because the claim was that this shows that there was limited jurisdictions.
Correct.
But I'm bringing to the table some alternative information here that kind of takes away from it subtracts from your argument.
because again, we don't have a problem with the appellate structure. So if extenuating circumstances were such that my entire jurisdiction, this would even.
Isn't this crazy? So Erick Ybarra tries to call him on it and says, okay, let's go back to Canon number 6. It seems that everything that you're bringing up is actually taking away from the strength of your argument, and he just cuts him off. He goes straight to cutting him off, and he says, listen, I don't have a problem with papal primacy. Do you see the kind of equivocation that's going on, Ramon?
Yeah, between supremacy and primacy, yeah.
could even happen now. Like, let's say that my entire area of Orthodoxy, say they believed in, I don't know, they adopted Arianism. Let's say that all the Orthodox around me adopted Arianism, and I went to and appealed to the first hierarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in America, Metropolitan. Let's say he adopted Arianism for the sake of argument. Now he hasn't, but let's say he had. I could then, if he adopted Arianism, I could appeal elsewhere outside of him to a more respected metropolitan area, and that's what we see in that structure that develops in the councils of the metropolitans, the pentarchy as it's called. They're interchangeable. People come and they go, and this pentarchy, there's nothing magical about pentarchy, but eventually they become kind of normative. Then you get later patriarchates added, like Moscow, right? So there's nothing. We don't believe that what happens in ecumenical councils or in canon law, even though it's normative, it's not necessarily divine law, because it's a little more flexible in church history. You have to do the principle of economia, right? I think Roman Catholic canon law people would admit that there's such a thing as economia, where local bishops have to say make a decision about how to receive converts in XYZ circumstances, right? So that's economia. So there's a little more flexibility when it comes to canon law. Whereas if it's divine law, and certainly canon law reflects divine law, but when it's divine law, you can't be flexible. Right? Like we can't change moral law and say, oh well, now homosexuality is of God, right? And then like 50 years ago it wasn't. Although again, I'm not trying to be mean here, but Francis has literally just said this. He just said 50 years ago the death penalty was moral. We now no longer understand that to be the case. So again, there's this constant innovating and evolving is the whole point.
Okay.
So
let me get a chance to say something here. Maybe I could reframe this response to you, Jay. I can be an Eastern Orthodox Christian and deny your argument on Canon 6. Does that make sense?
I mean, I suppose hypothetically you could, but
because and the reason why is because you just spent 5 minutes conceding what I've been saying here.
No,
that the Roman See had a universal appellate jurisdiction.
No. Any of the important sees could be appealed to. For example, Athanasius gets appealed to at times, right? And if he gets persecuted, where's he going to appeal? He's going to appeal to the first see, right? But being, listen, being the first in the appellate structure does not equate to universal jurisdiction in terms of infallibility. Now, if the church is in a crisis situation and you have like an Arian,
do you see how he just smuggled a straw man in?
Yep.
But it still seems like he's still saying that the Pope has the highest authority. Like,
right, but what
like
but what he's smuggling in, right, is the straw man that although he recognizes papal primacy, he doesn't recognize universal jurisdiction with papal infallibility. So he's not distinguishing between papal supremacy or universal ordinary jurisdiction and infallibility. You're going to see him play this straw man out. But what I'm just saying is that right now he's smuggling in. We'll just rewind like a few more seconds, okay?
Listen, being the first in the appellate structure does not equate to universal jurisdiction in terms of infallibility. Now, if
you see what I mean?
In a crisis situation, and you have like an Arian crisis, only a handful of bishops that are Orthodox. Absolutely, makes sense why you would have the there's even a term. What's the term in Roman?
This is what I mean. You have to be very careful when you're arguing with the Eastern Orthodox. Is that they're presupposing all of these ideas and these type of straw men and where that straw man is.
Canon law, where in extremis, right? You could have an in extremis situation, which was not the norm, because actually the ancient canons say that you have to have multiple bishops present from the local metropolitan to ordain any new bishop, right? By the way, why did all that change after the second millennium, and now only the Pope ordains the bishops, right? So obviously there's a change in the view, because prior to that, the ancient canons do not say the Pope confirms every bishop in the world.
Right. So yeah, let me get some space here, though. You talked about the appellate structure of the Orthodox Church. That's all I would have to appeal to in order to show that your argument on Canon 6 is wrong.
No, you have no argument on Canon 6 because you admit that there's nothing there except, oh, wait, it's not actually mentioned, it's just assumed. And let me show you that this guy who was at the council later in the extreme situation with Arians did X, Y, Z. No, it's not there in the canon at all because not the church view.
But this is what the listeners have. The listeners,
listen, appellate structure to
how are we going to have an exchange here if you're
doesn't prove universal jurisdiction and infallibility?
I got to have some space here to talk, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead. Jump in here, Eric.
Okay. So at the Council of Sardica, this is what the bishop father said. They said, quote, "For this will seem to be most good and very proper, if to the head, that is to the See of Peter, the bishops of the Lord shall refer from all the provinces of the world." So I don't have to defend papal infallibility and all this other highfalutin stuff in order to refute what Jay was saying about Canon 6. The argument that Jay was making about Canon 6 is that there's only limited jurisdictions. The text is in his article there. And yet what we see admitted 15 years later is a universal appellate jurisdiction. And it's stated in Canon 3, Canon 4, and Canon 5 of Sardica. Any bishop anywhere in the world can appeal.
You just ignore the entire argument that I made. If I appeal to the first hierarch of Rocor, that doesn't mean that he has jurisdiction over all of America because he's called the first hierarch.
No, go ahead and respond.
Yeah, you can appeal. Whoever you appeal to at the highest level has an appellate jurisdiction.
Correct.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying here.
That's not infallibility.
But my argument was the table set here for this evening was not papal infallibility.
That is bound up with the doctrine. You have to defend that at Canon 6 of Nicea.
Well, we can get to papal infallibility, but I would never go to where I'm going to in order to prove that.
Obviously not, because it's not there.
I agree.
Because
I agree. So
you agree it's not there, so papal infallibility involves?
No. In the survived data of the Council of Nicea, there's no evidence of papal infallibility. So there's no evidence of iconography. There's no evidence of the essence and energy distinction.
No, you're wrong.
You
don't know about the essence and energy distinction in that regard. Have you read Dionysius?
What I'm saying here is I'm using a certain circumscribed amount of data to argue that your argument about the limitation of Rome's jurisdiction is wrong. I'm not arguing for papal infallibility. I'm not arguing.
That is part of the argument. Even
all I would have to do is appeal to what you just said.
No, you have to, for your argument. Listen, for your argument to hold,
Eastern Orthodox Church.
You just ignore the argument.
Position. The patriarchal structure of receiving appeals is all I would have to appeal to.
Nope.
Yeah. So wait.
Rome at the time could hear appeals.
So if we talk about Egypt jurisdiction, might only be like, well, the Patriarch of Alexandria doesn't have infallibility, therefore Egypt jurisdiction is not there.
Yeah, but their claim is that no one has infallibility. From their worldview,
yeah, but
no patriarch has infallibility. That's their argument.
Yeah, but like I'm using their infallibility argument to discredit Egypt's jurisdiction. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you tie jurisdiction and infallibility so closely, that would invalidate all jurisdictions. You know what I'm saying?
According to our worldview, and then they're going to claim that it wouldn't in theirs.
In their worldview, it would invalidate everyone. Every jurisdiction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And Erick
Yeah.
Ybarra is going to get to that point. So he's gonna ask Jay Dyer about his own like jurisdictional affiliation, and then he's gonna talk about, well, how do you maintain jurisdiction in a case of transience, right? Where, because the smaller diocesan ordinaries can lose their jurisdiction if their patriarch falls out of jurisdiction with another patriarch. And that's happened that's always happened within Eastern Orthodoxy. So then how do you maintain that if that is broken and not reestablished and reestablished sometime in the future, how could you maintain that the jurisdiction of the lower jurisdictions was ever maintained, or even that of the metropolitan see? You'll see he'll get there.
No.
Like-
They could. Yes, they could. Absolutely.
Okay, I understand Athanasius heard appeals, but
Does that mean that Athanasius had a universal jurisdiction over everybody who appealed to him? For your
No.
argument to hold, that's what you have to say. That's why.
I wouldn't defend that at all. There was
That's
several.
what you have to say. That's what you have to say for your
Well,
argument.
Let me give you an example, Jay. I can give you a perfect example. Okay, there was a bishop underneath the Patriarchate of Constantinople in the 6th century. His name was John of Chalcedon. He was accused of believing. I want to say he was accused of a Gnostic or being a Pelagian, and he appealed above his immediate synod to the Patriarch of Constantinople. So the Patriarch of Constantinople set up court. They had a tribunal, and they found him guilty. So John of Chalcedon lodged an appeal to Rome. It happened to be St. Gregory the Great at the time. John showed his case to Pope Gregory, and Pope Gregory overturned that decision because he found out that they were misunderstanding what he was saying.
Right.
And he sent letters back to Constantinople saying this man deserves his see back. Okay, that we're not getting into papal infallibility.
We don't have to include papal infallibility. That's part of the argument. Even though you don't want to go there, that is part of the argument.
Look, Jay, there's something called setting off an argument and choosing to go to another argument at a different time. If I wanted to argue for papal infallibility, I would have started on an entirely different footing here.
No, but see, that's the thing is that you're not representing. No, that's not the debate. It's not a singular debate.
That's the rule of debate. It's a basic rule of debate, Jay. I'm not here arguing.
We're arguing worldviews.
If you want, I could switch to the papal infallibility, but that's not what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, right. Because all you're doing is appealing to an appellate structure, which doesn't prove the thing that you need to prove. All it's proving is that there's an appellate structure. Nobody disagrees.
Okay, so what you're saying is
So
that
all I
I need to come to
all I
this
have to do is give you one
to prove
example, like
something
Athanasius.
besides what I came to prove. I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense.
That's not how worldviews work. That's why you're not a good philosopher. That's why on the epistemic issue, you're also going to be correct.
Okay.
but we
Answer
can
Erick's
get- we can
question.
get to the epistemic
Yeah, now do you see the underhandedness of this?
Well, it was just like an ad hominem.
Well,
issue, but I guess we'll put a period here and we'll let the.
so the reason why I want to go through this, Ramon, with us,
Yeah.
the Catholics in the chat, is because we're going to have these conversations with Eastern Orthodox and Protestants.
readers and the
Okay.
listeners judge. Jay said that there's no other jurisdiction besides the limited
That's not,
metropolitan.
appealing is not giving universal jurisdiction.
Okay, there's
Listen,
all
if you-
scholars.
if you admit-
there's not a single historian
Authority,
that
if you-
denies
you admit-
that Rome had an appellate
That's why you're
jurisdiction
stuck.
and that it was unlimited.
If Athanasius gets appealed to outside of his jurisdiction, does that mean he has a jurisdiction beyond his jurisdiction? No.
No,
That-
here's what I'm trying to.
that
here's
just
what I'm
proves your
trying to
argument.
say. No, it doesn't refute my
Does.
argument because
Does.
it's conceded by the Eastern Orthodox canon law that you could appeal to Rome in the first
That
10
doesn't
centuries.
prove universal jurisdiction and infallibility, and those go together because that's what evolved. That's what we're here to argue against. We're not here to argue against your
what you
particular
did.
papacy.
That's what you came to argue. But the title of the video, Jay, was Canon 6 of Nicea. Okay, so look.
Yeah, the papacy
listeners
is a
can
thing
judge.
that it stands or falls together. It's a whole
Right.
thing.
Right, okay, and that's not exactly true.
No, that's totally true. It's a house of cards. It stands or falls together.
Okay, so you're saying that we cannot discuss the Council of Nicaea without discussing the clown masses of today? Is that your argument?
You can talk about it, but I'm talking about papal infallibility and all the papal claims and the universal temporal jurisdiction that all goes into it that later evolved. That needs to be there in Nicaea, and it's not. You admit that there's no.
So let me ask you something. You said that
He's making
believe
assumptions
in,
based off
development.
his argument. And
That's
then from
correct,
there, going
because-
into- Mhm.
Because every other assumption that he makes about the relationship between papal infallibility and papal supremacy has to do with a non sequitur interpretation of canon number 6 in establishing papal primacy. That's how it's all related. And clearly in like the past like minute or so of just Jay Dyer just basically bloviating and saying it's all a house of cards, do you see the similarities in Jay Dyer's position in the Sedevacantists?
Who?
The Sedevacantists.
So are those like heretics?
Huh?
I'm not familiar with them yet.
Okay, we'll talk about the Sedevacantists later.
Okay.
doctrine.
Correct.
Do we see anything about icons in the Council of Nicaea?
We do have evidence of iconography from the earliest days of the church. Absolutely.
Yeah, we have evidence of iconography, but I don't know of any evidence of the specific venerating doctrine at Council of Nicaea 787. Do you have any
Yes, no,
textual?
it's the same. If you read John Damascus's argumentation for and St. Theodore's
John Damascus, that's
if you read their argumentation on why we venerate icons, they appeal to the 1st and 2nd century fathers, particularly things like relics and the Eucharist. So yes, there is the earliest day veneration of those.
Right, but so what we have here is some evidence, but you have to tease it out, you have to develop it, you have to bring out more of what's there. But
that is not an evolving of doctrine.
Evidence.
Explicating what's already there is not an evolving of doctrine.
Okay, well, call it that. Call it explication.
That's a big difference because the Vatican I theologians like Newman argued for development and evolution of dogma. That's why your Vatican II church doesn't teach what the First Millennium Church taught.
Okay, but despite what you say, all of the scholars are in agreement.
What I say, all the scholars. Does the Pope pray in Mecca or towards Mecca and in the Blue Mosque?
What scholar are you referring to that can tell you that the bishops of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century were teaching the doctrine of Nicaea too?
I don't have to appeal because I've actually read those fathers. I don't have to appeal to scholars. I can tell you about the way that the early fathers talked about the relics, the way they talked about the bones of the saints, the way they talked about the Eucharist, the way they talked about all of those principles that went into the worship and liturgy of the church. We have liturgies from those days.
Right, but the specific doctrine of Nicaea
That's
too.
not evolution. Explicating the doctrine is not the doctrine of evolution of dogma.
Well, I would stand here and say all we need to do is explicate what's already there, and that's what I understand by theological development. So if we could touch,
but that's not what Vatican II and the Roman Catholic Church have done, especially in the second.
Okay, well that's an assertion. It's a gratuitous one, but I'm telling you,
Immortalium Animus, it says that pan-religious ceremonies and praying together are indifferentism and apostasy.
Okay, we can get to that, but
I
want to close off what we.
That's a very clear argument. You're defending a structure that does this.
Okay, we're talking. Look, Jay, the listeners who are listening to this, they want to know if what you're saying.
The trick doesn't work because you're having to defend men that pray in mosques and in synagogues towards Mecca.
Okay, we can discuss what the early church fathers believed.
You don't want to go there.
Or you can go to the clown mass argument.
In fairness, do not a number of Eastern Orthodox clergy do the same? I mean,
our church is not built on one bishop.
Okay, but Eric, what would you say in response to that?
Yeah, we could have another show on all the things that have been going on in Orthodoxy since the 20s.
How's it going?
Our church is not built on
We're
one
watching.
I understand, but when did you join the Orthodox Church?
No, we're not here to debate my personal matters. We're not here to deflect away.
Okay, no, I'm not saying when.
This is why you're not an honest actor, because when you
the reason why I'm asking
on issues, this is what you do.
Jay, the reason why I'm asking you is not to find out how long you've been an Orthodox Christian.
Sure.
I'm asking you, did you come into the Orthodox Church when Bartholomew was the bishop of Constantinople in good relations with Russia?
No.
So the time that you came into Orthodoxy, the precise day that you came into Orthodoxy,
Well,
you were not.
So this is where Erick Ybarra is going to get into the problems with jurisdiction according to the Orthodox worldview, quote unquote, or epistemology.
This is not how Orthodox canon law works, by the way.
But okay, so when you came into Orthodoxy, was Kirill in canonical peace with Bartholomew?
I didn't come in under Kirill. I came in under the Antiochians, and then I moved to the Russian Orthodox.
Okay, so you were under John then of Antioch. Okay, was John in canonical peace with Bartholomew?
I was under the local bishop of America, right? So again, having a metropolitan does not mean that he is the Pope over us. It's the first.
No, I understand. I understand, but the Orthodox Church takes communion very seriously. Am I
Absolutely.
right? Okay.
Correct.
So was John of Antioch in canonical communion with Bartholomew of Constantinople?
Correct, he was, as far as I recall. Yeah.
So when you say Amen at the altar at your local parish that cites John and Bartholomew,
The way that Orthodox canon law works is that we don't immediately say that a person who makes an error says something. It's not like the whole church is guilty of that, right? And
why can't you give us the same benefit then?
because it's 60 years of this. That's why.
Okay, so 1920 to 2020, that's 100.
Well, no, there's two different arguments here of the Patriarch of Constantinople, present day, committing pan-religious, heretical type actions versus what was going on 100 years ago. Now, if you could
So
demonstrate,
Anglican indifferentism with the Anglican epistle.
no. If you could read Father Peter Here's book on the history of ecumenism, where he shows that the origins of ecumenism were missionary efforts, and then it was basically co-opted.
Okay. Well, in any case, we're dealing with what happened when you came into the Orthodox Church.
Correct.
And if you want, we can talk about when I became a
That's
Catholic.
the reason I moved. That's the reason.
You came on the show to expose all these problems about me being in communion with Pope Francis. I
Yeah,
think you
he's
should extend the
true, you guys
courtesy of me
like-
turning the tables. So
Yeah,
when you came
but
into
that's
the
why I
Orthodox
left.
Church,
I moved away from that communion very quickly.
you were in communion with a priest who's in
Okay.
communion with a bishop.
Yeah, 2
who's in
months
communion
versus
with
70
a
years of Vatican II.
metropolitan,
2 months
who's in
versus 70 years.
communion with John of Antioch.
2 months
who's in
versus 70
communion
years.
with
Papers.
Bartholomew of
2 months
Constantinople.
versus 70 years.
So what happens if Kirill joins
See,
back with
that's all he
Bartholomew? Are we good to go
repeats.
elsewhere?
Again, the way that it works canonically is that it's not like overnight. If a person chooses to do that, if that's upon their conscience, that's ultimately up for God to judge. But typically what would happen is there would be a synodal situation. And so that's why it was actually a big move for Kirill to not be in communion with the Greeks. That was the right action. That was the right move. So that's part of the reason why I went to the Russian Orthodox Church. I don't think that everybody in the Antiochian Church is automatically damned. I don't think that everybody who's in good faith in the Roman Catholic Church is automatically damned. But I think that the structure, and I mean, again, we would say there's a difference between the way.
Just so you know, that is not his position now. His position now is that everybody who is not Eastern Orthodox is damned.
Seriously?
The church father,
Yep.
the canon law
Can you
talks
pull it
about
up?
whether it's Eastern or Western, the first millennium talks about bald-faced heresy, right?
Can
And
I
this is
see
usually
that?
referring to people who have obstinately been preaching
We can watch it
And I
after.
would say that 70 years of
All right.
Vatican II, 60 years, whatever it is bald-faced and is obstinate, and that's different from people in these various churches who don't know what's going on. I will extend that grace. That's why I will begin discussions with any Roman Catholic on good terms and in good faith, because I don't expect that everybody has all this figured out. I mean, I certainly didn't for a long time, and I would extend that to you. But all I've seen from you, Eric, is a sort of a continual hard-headedness about these issues.
Well,
Go
the
ahead and
thing,
respond to that. What would you say about you being hard-headed? What would be your comments on that?
yeah, I mean, all I'm doing here is reversing the statements, and I'm appealing to history. I'm appealing to fathers. I'm appealing to councils. I'm appealing to your own saints. I'm appealing to current canon Orthodox law to show that your argument on Canon 6 of Nicaea was wrong.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I don't think your arguments worked.
But you yourself refuted it by appealing to Orthodox appellate jurisdiction.
Nope. That disproves universal jurisdiction. I don't know how many times I have to tell you that if
We're talking about your argument.
Athanasius doesn't have universal jurisdiction because people from outside of his jurisdiction appeal to him, and neither does Rome.
Okay, so let me touch on that point, Jay, about Athanasius and everything, because I want to help you out there. In the year 861,
I think you need help, bro.
In the year 861, the Council of Constantinople. Have you read the acts of that council?
Yes.
Okay, so if you read the acts of the Council of Constantinople 861, which is the council that legates from Rome went initially to Constantinople to investigate the issue of Photius versus Ignatius.
Yes, glad you went there.
Right. So was Nicholas appealed to?
By the way, you're wrong about that. Did you know that actually is the Eastern Synod that the Pope affirmed and then later reversed?
No, the Pope never affirmed that council.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yes, I proved it right there. There's your link.
861, Jay, not 869, not 879.
Oh, I'm not worried about that.
I asked you if you read the acts of the Council of Constantinople 861.
Yeah, but again, what does that have to do with Athanasius?
Excuse me. Did you read the Council of Constantinople 861?
What does that have to do with Athanasius?
Well, because I'm following upon this, a good point that you brought up is just because Athanasius receives appeals from other sees, that doesn't mean he has jurisdiction over those sees. So I want to follow up with that. Okay, that's why I said I want to help. I want to help the discussion. I want to help the listeners here.
Yeah.
So at the Council of 861, I just want to know, did you read, because I want to know if I have to.
Unless I'm mistaken, I believe I've read that.
Okay, all right. So I just want to know if I have to explain it. I'm not trying to, ask you if you read it because I don't want, that you don't know about it. That's not what I'm saying. Because if not, then I have to do a little bit of explaining. But Photius of Constantinople sent a letter to Pope Nicholas saying, hey, I'm in the chair now. Pope Nicholas was a bit skeptical about this. So he sent legates to investigate. When they got to Constantinople, the legates arrived as judges. This is what comes up in the acta of that council. Nobody appealed to Pope Nicholas. Okay, so he shows up as judge of this council, and somebody had brought up the question at the council: what, how can Rome come here and judge the situation? And the legate said that the Pope of Rome has the legal right to investigate affairs in every other church. The Greek representative of the council responded and said, we have no disagreement with that. And they allowed for the trial to be had. And they found out that Photius, the legates, agreed with Photius. Okay, so when they got back to Rome, Pope Nicholas did not receive that council. So you were talking about a different council. Okay, but there we have a situation where the Byzantine episcopate admitted that Rome had the legal right to hear appeals anywhere in the world and overturn decisions, and that if people did not observe those decisions, they would be in conflict with the canons. That's all I'm arguing, to show that back in the 4th century, Rome enjoyed this particular legal jurisdiction.
The argument from 861 is not what's present back then. This is what you do, is read what you find later back into. This is your whole project.
But the council at 861 referred to the 4th century.
So what?
But you just said it had nothing to do with the 4th century.
No, I'm saying that the fact that there's this council in 861 does not prove what you're trying to prove. So yes, this council can make that appeal. It can look back and it can say that. Just like at the council of Florence,
Dyer's
you had many of
arguing
the
like a
patriarchs
child.
do the same thing.
So they're wrong to do that?
Sure.
They're wrong to appeal to the past.
Correct.
I don't think that's
wrong. They're wrong to appeal in this way because.
So both the Roman
there's a pattern of nonconformity, yes, in the Eastern Church, correct.
Okay, so the Byzantine episcopate with Photius in presidency.
Did you hear what he just said? He says there is a pattern of nonconformity in the old, or in the Greek Orthodox mindset at the time. Did you hear him say that?
Mm-hmm.
Their epistemological framework is one of nonconformity.
Was wrong when they agreed that the 4th century canon law testifies that Rome could hear appeals and overturn decisions anywhere in the world.
Yes, there are many cases where there are errors in canon law. That's why we listen. That's why we believe that the distinction I made earlier between canon law being on the basis of custom and divine law being de jure divine, right? There's a difference between those two things. So we don't appeal to canon law. We don't appeal to everything that Western popes have done as if that was proof of the position that you have. In other words, if you, as a Roman Catholic, you can appeal to all kinds of statements in papal progenitors, right, in the first millennium. But that doesn't prove.
I could appeal to Greek councils and still be wrong.
You can. In fact, this is the whole argument of the Council of Florence.
Well, yeah, the Council of Florence is one thing, but I'm appealing to a council where
it's a regional council. Canon law is not infallible.
Okay. Well, the Council of 869, which met 8 or 9 years later, said the same thing in stronger terms.
You can dig up these things like this, and I can point to Pope Hormisdas, right? And I can point out that the Sixth Council includes him, as does the Confession of Saint Sophronius, in the list of the heretics, right? And all you're going to say is that, yeah, but that was a mistake, and later the Pope corrected that. But what it shows is that the universal mind of the Church, of the Sixth Council, had no problem condemning a Pope. So I have no problem admitting errors in the East, in the West. There have been countless patriarchs of Constantinople who have been heretics. The fact that I can admit that a patriarch of Constantinople in many cases can be a heretic goes perfectly with saying that he can be wrong in his local synods.
Yeah.
He can come up with canons. He can think all kinds of heretical things. That doesn't prove Eastern Orthodoxy wrong, because here we are still existing.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Church fathers can be wrong.
Yep.
Councils can be wrong.
Local synods can be wrong, yes.
Well, even ecumenical councils can be wrong.
No. Aspects of local synods can later be received into ecumenical synods.
Well, okay, well, the Council of 879.
Not an ecumenical council.
Okay, so let me ask you something. The Council of 879 This is the council that many Orthodox are wanting to bring out as the 8th ecumenical council. In fact, their Mark of Ephesus
Wait,
said
Abysmal,
Florence
could you pause
the
this real
authority of this
quick?
council. Right. This
A point I really want to address. So he's saying that even that I recognize that there's heresy and there's people that have already been condemned, it's still standing here today. Then couldn't he still make this argument to like any other ancient thing in general? You
Yeah.
know, so I don't think it's even a good argument at all.
It isn't, but that's the thing. This is kind of what it is. It's like there's a lot of smart people in Eastern Orthodoxy. Don't get that wrong. They're very well read on this stuff, but they hold a certain epistemological framework that you're going to hear like guys like Fight, right? Like he's against Palimism because Fight is aware of all this freaking nonsense that they're doing as well, right? And Fight attacks their one of their epistemological frameworks, which is St. Gregory of Palamos, all right? That's kind of the Dyerite worldview as well, just so you're aware. And they're going to say, well, energia is in the Greek New Testament and all this other stuff. But you're right.
Yeah,
The fact that they can pick and choose, right, which saints, which councils, which patriarchs, which in order to establish their own jurisdictional continuity, right? It's a hermeneutic. It's a hermeneutic not of continuity. It's a hermeneutic of a non-conformity. He's already said it. Yep.
Because when you understand, I guess the Protestant Revolution, the Protestants are also guilty of doing the same exact thing. For example, James White, Dr. James White, when you such as Catholics that have argued with him, he will argue and just pick and choose church fathers to try to prove his point. And then when someone quotes him another quote refuting him, then he'll argue like a little baby.
Remedy did the same thing. Remember that with the 66 books?
Yep. And it all has to do with centralized authority, ordinary universal jurisdiction. And they're right. Okay, we'll continue.
Council is
But
not
yeah,
a
I just
heretical
wanted to point
council,
that
at
out.
least.
But yeah.
Okay, it may even be an ecumenical council in the near future.
Yeah, the Orthodox view holds it as authoritative. We don't have as clear a divide. Let me give you an example. So after the oikumene of the Imperium goes away, right? There are Palamite synods. For us, for most Orthodox in the world, they are received as authoritative. So there's an aspect of reception theory that's true for Orthodox. There's also an aspect of reception theory that's true for Roman Catholicism too, because Roman Catholics look back and they receive and they reject both saints historical events. They'll change their mind on certain things, and there's also an aspect to which the Pope is perceived to be true because of reception. So all of these things actually go into whether you're Orthodox or Roman Catholic. They both have an aspect of reception theory. So what I'm saying is that the Palamite synods, they eventually made it into our liturgy, for example, the condemnations of those who don't believe in uncreated grace. So for us, that's authoritative. So in other words, it's not as black and white as the way that it is in the Roman Catholic perspective, where you think you have a list of the document. This is the book which shows me all the infallible documents, book X, Y, Z, book Denzinger, and then I have this. It's not like that in Orthodox.
Okay, all right. So
legalities.
I understand. Thank you for going
not black and white.
I understand. Yeah, and I want to respect that because a lot of Roman Catholics have this. We could call them epistemological gluttons. They seem to want everything to be black and white.
Okay.
But so I appreciate the point. But I just want to get this straight. I could appeal to church fathers. I could appeal to councils, and I could appeal to authoritative councils that are accepted, and I can even appeal to ecumenical councils, and they could all be wrong.
You have the same view. Yes.
I understand, but I can table that. But I'm asking if that's what you're doing right now.
Yeah, we have that same view now. An ecumenical council, in terms of what's received over time, no, it's not going to be wrong.
Okay. So
and let me show you that we both agree with that. Like you agree with that because the Seventh Council, when it affirms the Trollan Synod, the Quinisex Council, it actually says that married priests are okay. The Pope later said that is not okay. We're not going to accept that canon of Trollo that is accepted at Nicea as universal. That's one example where the Roman Catholic Church does the exact same thing. There's a council that does X, Y, Z. They look back and they say, well, this part, and we're not going to do this. There's other examples in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. And we have no problem saying, obviously, the Council of Florence. We don't accept the Council of Florence.
You know what's ironic about this? That's what's happening with Vatican II right now. But he won't allow, in the case of Vatican II, because Vatican I happened, he won't allow the same thing of like this theory of reception for validation or falsification. He won't allow that as a principle for Roman Catholics, but he retains that as a Greek Orthodox.
Just the thing is, J. Dyer doesn't have any authority
right
when it comes to
I shoulder that.
Pope.
I shoulder that. We do that as
there's no final say in
Church has done that over and over again. Okay, but I just want to get straight because my question is very specific here. Because I'm trying to build a case for the papacy as a divine institution. That, again, that papal infallibility is only one aspect. I haven't even gotten to that yet. Or if we're probably not going to get to that today. But I could appeal to church fathers. I could appeal to Eastern Orthodox saints. I could appeal to Eastern Orthodox doctors. I could appeal to local councils. I could appeal to authoritative local councils that are not rejected.
Correct.
I could appeal to ecumenical councils to try and prove that there was this belief, quirky as you might want to see it, that the Pope of Rome has this divine investiture through Christ our Lord to Peter, and it could all be wrong still.
Yeah, of course. If
So,
I didn't
so
think
my
that, I
next
wouldn't be
question,
here.
my next question,
Because it's read into it.
right? Oh, okay. So there's two different claims here. What I'm asking you,
You're listing all these things that we just went through. So I think you're just, where are you going?
I just want, this is more of a criterion question. Okay. If I could appeal to church fathers in the East, I could appeal to doctors in the East, councils, ecumenical councils, to show that there was this belief
Jay Dyer gets so
that there is a
emotional
divine
about this.
investiture in the Roman See.
No, I have not granted that. That was the very thing that I disagreed
See?
with from the beginning.
Okay. So, but when church fathers say
Yeah.
that, and when councils say that, they're just wrong.
No, this is, you've tried to do a sleight of hand here, where again, our view is that the Roman Catholic doctrine of the papacy has evolved from a position of honor and a position of appellate structure into universal jurisdiction and infallibility. That's what we reject. That's why the whole issue is over. And so there are many fathers in the West. Okay,
I understand.
So now you're saying, you're saying I can appeal to fathers who talk about these things and they're all wrong. That's
No. Okay, but let me get more concrete here. The letter of Saint Agatho to the Council of Constantinople III. It's one of those famous letters that we would say as Roman Catholics is an ex cathedra. There's a couple of ex cathedra
The
statements.
only thing you care about is the fact that he talks about the See of Peter, and you don't even believe the essence energy distinction.
Okay, but we could talk about the essence and energy distinction, but here's the issue. Okay.
No, because I can prove that you're wrong by the fact that you don't believe the letter and you just want to copy
Okay.
and paste the.
Yes, and I would welcome that, Jay. But I need some space to talk about this point before we can get to that point. Can I get that?
How are you going to appeal to a document that you don't believe?
Okay, but I'm going to say it works both ways. Can I show that there's a problem here that's equally on your shoulders?
No, because it's
So
very.
I can't do that. You're not going to give me the chance to do that.
Yeah, because we have that. Ultimately, that comes back down to paradigms, doesn't it?
Well, we could get to paradigms, but let me say what I'm going to say, and then we can get to epistemology. We can get to paradigms. We can get to
You're an apologist for the papacy. That's all you are.
But you might call me that, Jay. But I
He's
have
already
very-
making
some of my best
assumptions
friends
based
are
off his
Eastern
character.
Orthodox.
Yeah, he's just being
I'm not out to
reductivist.
collect converts here.
Mhm.
Okay,
I am. I think that you're a
Argumentative,
very
yeah.
dangerous church.
Okay, I understand, Jay. I understand that, but and I'm not going to try to stop you. But here we're trying to follow rules of basic debate here. I have a point that I want to make that I believe.
Yeah, I know you think
the
that.
problem on
I know you think it proves infallibility. You think it proves jurisdiction and special promise of Peter.
But you don't know what I'm
You
going to
don't-
say.
I've heard the Pope St. Agatha letter argument. Don't you think I used to make it as a Roman
Okay, you've heard other people make
Don't
it.
you think I used to make that argument as a Roman
No, yes,
I did.
yeah, and I want to respect that because I'm not coming to the table here speaking to somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about. I know you know what I'm talking about, but I need a space to make a point. Yeah, can I get it?
I'm sitting here quiet.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So we'll see how far this goes. The letter of Saint Agatho to the Council of Constantinople III says, according to Philip Schaff, who's a Protestant historian, and one in his volumes on the church, the history of the church, he says that Pope Saint Agatho claims the doctrine of papal infallibility in that letter. Now I know you know that. I'm not done. Okay, that's not what I'm getting at. That letter of Agatho wasn't accepted partially by the council. The statements that were made by the council when they received that letter are astounding. They call it this is the divine, the divine healer in heaven has made you the divine healer for us on earth. All this highfalutin stuff. Okay, we don't take that literally, but it accepts it in totality. So the very kernel of what became the heresy that today we call papal infallibility was there, according to a Protestant historian, in the letter of Agatho. It was received by the council as the dogmatic statement of the council.
Okay, this is
The
stupid.
emperor.
Eric,
At
this
the
is
time-
ridiculous. I can cite you, Protestant scholars in the Schaff set, who list the condemnations of Hormisdas at that same council as proving against papal infallibility. So your citing Schaff is utterly pointless. It means nothing.
Okay, but my point still has. I'm going to make it, and then I'm going to toss it to you so you can talk about it. Okay, that letter teaches papal infallibility. Okay, number two, the council received that letter. Now, they may not have believed papal infallibility. Okay, but they received that letter. The council gives us evidence that the letter was divinely written. Okay, maybe they were exaggerating a little bit, maybe a lot. The emperor at the time accepted that letter and made it the dogmatic statement of the council. Okay, so how can you say that this is negligible as a piece of evidence, not proving papal infallibility, but showing that one of your saints, Agatho, believed it, that one of your councils accepted it, and number three, it's been received over time. So, the Byzantines took apart Honorius's letter because it had the monothelite doctrine in it.
Did you kill this
Right?
room?
Honorius said, "One will."
We're watching something.
Right? Well, why did
Oh.
they condemn Agatho when he said that the See of Rome is divinely invested with this authority to teach the whole church?
For two reasons. One, because when there was persecution going on at that time, St. Maximus needed the aid of Rome because he was being persecuted in the East by heretics. There's no doubt about that. He needed that help. And so there was an appellate structure. There was an appeal, not just to Rome, but to anywhere else that could back up St. Maximus. And of course, he was persecuted over this. What you should read is this, the Confession of St. Sophronius at length, which explains his confession about the Sixth Council. And it goes into great detail, in much more detail than the letter of Agatho. I'm not saying that we toss it aside. My point is that we would say that you could even read the words of Agatho in a way that is Orthodox. But he's Orthodox because he's Orthodox. He's not Orthodox because he's the Pope. That's the big difference between us. And that's why that council, they're not double-minded. They weren't double thinkers. That's why that council had no problem condemning a Pope. So unless you think they were just retarded double-minded idiots who, on the one hand, signed a condemnation of Pope Hormisdas, and then turned around and said, "Oh, but the Pope Agatha is absolutely infallible, and this is divinely instituted from here." They're not that dumb, and in fact, I'll turn that right around on you. And if you look at the shaft set in the Sixth Council, the Protestant scholars there go to great lengths to prove that they actually did condemn Pope Honorius, and the statement, the Confession of Saint Sophronius, condemns Pope Honorius, and it is accepted at the Sixth Council.
Okay,
it also teaches the essence energy distinction as Saint Maximus.
Could you
as
pause
the
this
Sixth
real
Council,
quick?
as that damn
I
letter
want to
from
add
Agatha does,
something
that you don't accept.
about one of
okay.
his points.
So just
Just
to
write
say,
it
Maximus
down.
didn't appeal to Agatha because
We'll
Maximus
get to
had
it.
the
Okay, yeah.
Well,
but
I think he appealed to Rome.
okay, Sophronius appealed to Rome, Maximus appealed to Rome, right? Now,
No, I did not say Sophronius appealed to Rome. Maximus appealed to Rome because he was.
but Sophronius did appeal to Rome.
Okay, well, are you saying in here he appealed to Rome?
No, he sent Stephen of Dora, one of his archbishops of
He sent this letter out to all of the other bishops and patriarchs, and they signed his confession.
Right, but
And
he
that's what the
also
Sixth Council accepted.
right, but he also admitted that he did not have the jurisdiction to make a doctrinal judgment on the universal level, and that's very clear because at the Council of Lateran 649, the representatives of Sophronius, who was Stephen of Dore, in the second session, gave ample testimony of Sophronius's understanding of the whole error of the monothelites in the East and why Rome was being called to act upon it.
Okay, but the confession of Saint Sophronius, the way that it is written and stated and sent out to the other patriarchs and bishoprics, and then it's confirmed, that is a version of reception theory. That's the exact same way that we view all of this. That's why. Listen, that's why. No, listen. You've got it backwards. Agatha is Orthodox because he's Orthodox. He's not Orthodox because he's the Pope. It's the other way around, and that's why Pope Hormisdas was not Orthodox, and he was condemned by the council.
You're talking about Pope Honorius.
Excuse me, Honorius. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I thought you meant Honorius. Anyway, Hormisdas Honorius, close enough. But what? Okay, so I'm trying to get back to the point that I was.
You had it backwards. This is not rocket science, right?
No,
the council can condemn a pope.
Yes, the Pope at the time agreed to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Pope Leo II, that's Pope Saint Leo II, he agreed to that, and he was a papal supremacist.
Yeah, but that's the point, is that those doctrines evolved.
Right, so this guy was wrong
That's
too.
why eventually, yes, there can be errors.
Okay, so we can have all kinds.
So the doctrines
this is
evolve.
what it boils down to.
No, this is what it boils down to, is the casuistry, where the council can condemn a pope, the popes can agree that the pope can be condemned, and then somehow this is magically the Vatican I doctrine.
No. We haven't
Yes,
got
it
that.
is.
Nobody's
You have
claiming
to-
this.
You have to say that this is all Vatican I still.
No, you're saying I have to say that.
You do have to say that. That's what Roman Catholicism says.
No.
Unless you have your out of saying that the doctrines evolve.
No. I look, Jay, I want to rub elbows and shoulders with you on this because I really do get annoyed by the whole development of doctrine thing. There's a really bad way to explain it, and it's pretty silly. Okay, it makes us look real bad.
Yeah, because you.
Okay, what's your question?
My question?
Yeah.
So I put in the side chat.
So Jay therefore said to him that he can't appeal to Orthodox saints' doctrines, but then he also
Dirty
appeals to
Catholic.
Protestants, which they both condemn. So it was a double standard. Correct. You're right on track.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we had to establish, right. You can't let them get away with an informal logical fallacy in their interpretation of Canon 6. If you do, it just leads to this straw man and double
Yes.
standard.
100%.
You're defending a guy who prays in mosques.
Okay, but again,
Let's not go there because
we're
that's
talking about patristic history here. If we can talk
don't
about,
go to that. Don't go to that. Right?
so we can't talk about patristic history and what the church fathers believed. And what
Because
the
you can go around in circles and all that, and that doesn't mean that you got me. You didn't get me, because that council condemns a pope, right?
Right,
And Vatican I says that no one can judge a pope. Your own popes agreed that Honorius was a heretic.
Okay, let me ask you something just on that note. Okay, have you read the Acta of the Council of Rome 869?
If that's in Denzinger, maybe.
Okay, well, the Acta of that council was sent off to Constantinople, was read aloud at the Council of 869.
Eric,
The
all you're
Pope
trying
at
to
the
do
time-
is get us to admit a
the
point
Pope at
that
the
would make
time-
us accept Frank. We will never accept praying in mosques and Frank in the Vatican II apostasy. Why
Okay.
are you? Why do you want to?
He just keeps trying to cut him off, dude.
Yeah.
Is it just because of pride that you
Jay,
He knows he's wrong.
Just picture me as somebody who's not even in community.
He's so
with us.
nervous
We're
that
just
he
talking
can't
about history.
defend his
But that's-
point. He's not
we're-
confident.
But I understand, but we're debating a certain topic, and I could be an atheist for all that matters.
Yeah, this is where we get into the epistemic issue, because there's no such thing as the neutrality that you're trying to come up with here.
Okay, but what I'm saying is there are certain historical events, statements, and concepts that we're talking about
All
here.
of this is lawyer talk and
regardless.
endless books to try to prove something that is damaging people's souls. That's why it's so serious.
Okay, look, you have ample space to make that argument, and if you're right, you have your own venue with Jay Dyer's YouTube channel to make that argument and help all those souls. But you came onto this channel to discuss a certain debating point, and we've gone off from that, and I've allowed us to travel where you're going, and I'm going with you. You're going
No,
fast.
you're not going there, because you don't want to go to the Vatican II issues. You don't want to go to Mortality Animos, because it clearly refutes you.
But-
It says that pan religious ceremonies are indifferentism and apostasy, and the popes have participated in that for 60 years.
Okay, we're dealing with the Greek or the Eastern Orthodox history of the first 10 centuries, which, according to them,
I thought we were going to be able to discuss that and the Vatican II issues.
yes, but it takes two to tango here. You're making claims about the Council of Constantinople III that I'm trying to deal with in order to show that you're wrong.
Yeah,
And you're
but
not
I'm not wrong if that council itself had it in their mind that they could condemn the pope.
Right, but let me respond to that. Right? Can I respond to that without us going to the clown man?
Your response is just restating the view.
But you haven't even heard my response.
I'm waiting.
Okay, good. All right, so let's see how this one goes. The Council of 869 in Rome, Pope Hadrian II was rehearsing some of the history, and he was responding to Photius, who tried to excommunicate Pope Nicholas. And he said that Pope Honorius was condemned. This is the Pope talking, okay? Pope Hadrian II. The Pope was condemned because he was being accused of heresy. Before saying that, he said the rule that Rome cannot be judged stands. But here's the exception in the case of a heresy, because inferiors are not obliged to obey superiors when superiors are in heresy. So there was already at work, close to the history of Honorius, of people in the Eastern Orthodox Church, because Hadrian II is not a member of the Catholic Church, right? Catholic Church is a sect that was created in the second millennium. So Pope Hadrian II was a bishop in Rome, Orthodox Rome, and he already has a distinction between being free of judgment on disciplinary and moral levels, except for the situation of heresy.
Yeah. So your appeal, here's your whole argument.
I'm not done. I'm not done.
Well, you're talking slow motion, dude.
You can have a pope who's sainted in the Orthodox Church, Pope Leo II, who claims both infallibility, that's testified by non-Catholic historians. You can have a pope who believes in supremacy and agree to the condemnation of Pope Honorius.
Again,
you can say they're inconsistent, but that was there in the history.
Eric, it doesn't matter if you can appeal to popes to prove popes, because we don't have as our epistemic authority the Pope.
But I'm not appealing to popes.
Yes, you are. You are
appealing to Eastern Orthodox saints.
Yeah, but we don't have the same perspective that you do. We don't have a problem saying that. We don't have a problem saying that people's views can evolve and they can make mistakes. Many church fathers, many patriarchs, many saints, many theologians have made mistakes.
I get you. That's a good point. That's a good point. That's why I was asking before.
That's why it took centuries for the church to see where this was going and to figure out that we're going in two different ways, two different paths. That's why this happened.
Okay.
So it wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't like as soon as Gregory the Great says a statement about the importance of the Roman See, the whole world looks at him and says, because nobody thought that this is what would happen and this is the way that the church would go. Nobody expected a giant schism between the East and the West, right?
Oh boy.
Unfortunately, that's what happened. And our view is that it's
Dyer's just digging a hole for himself, man.
Approach to not just divine claims, but also temporal claims. And that's why
just
you're being
keeps
very
on
dishonest here, because
contradicting
you know that the Roman Catholic
himself.
claim is not just about authority related to Canon 6. It's also about all of these other prerogatives, the universal authority over all magistrates, over the entire world.
But you're accusing me of being dishonest, but I admit it.
Because you know that.
I do know that, but I've never claimed otherwise.
That's not there in this first millennium. It's a doctrine that evolved. That's what I'm saying. You know that evolves. That's why it was propped up with all these forgeries.
Okay, no.
Yes, it was. The temporal authority of the Roman bishop was absolutely propped up by all these authorities. And how absurd when we get to the Great Western Schism is it when we've got three guys in France claiming that the See of Peter is in France. Supposedly jurisdiction, right, is in Rome. I thought that was a suburban claim of the Italian province, right? Canon 6 of Nicea. But because he's the bishop of Rome, he can actually move the See of Peter to a palace in Avignon, France. That's what you have to defend. You have to defend all of that stuff. All I have to do is say, I don't want any part of that. We don't need that. We've been here for 1,000 years without the bishop of Rome, and we still exist. And the modern papacy admits that we still exist.
But how is this fair, Jay? Because I'm telling you what your own saints believe, what your own councils believe, and you're saying you can neglect all.
No, you have a Roman Catholic view of how Orthodoxy should view these things, as if everybody in the history of Orthodoxy, if they didn't have the exact same right perspective, or if they made an error, suddenly they're not a saint or they're not Orthodox. We don't have that all or nothing view. There are all kinds. We think Augustine made errors. We think Justin Martyr made errors.
I understand that, but
there are synods that made errors. There are canons that are erroneous.
Okay, but that goes back to my other question: is I appeal to all these Orthodox saints, I appeal to these councils, I appeal to these dogmatic letters.
But it's a doctrine that evolved. You haven't demonstrated the thing that you need to demonstrate, which is that it's universal jurisdiction and infallibility. What you've done is appeal to an appellate structure and read into that these things that you're later finding popping up in centuries later, which we think is something that evolved. Yes, it evolved.
Okay, so I have a question for you. What can I appeal to in the first millennium that would prove to you that the Pope has universal jurisdiction?
Nothing, because there's nothing there to prove it.
No, but what theoretically would be there? If, in other words, if the doctrine was true.
All I need is one example to disprove it, to show that it's not true, because it has to be true from the beginning all the way through.
So let me ask you this.
All I need is one example of a heretic in the office of Peter for decades, and we've had that for the last 70 years.
Right, I'm talking about.
It's a 2,000-year thing. It's a house of cards. It's all built on one thing.
Okay, but
it's about something in the 6th century.
If we're talking about the first millennium, what would be admitted as evidence of that the Pope had universal jurisdiction?
I've seen all of these arguments, and I don't see where they are.
No, but what I'm asking you is this: you saw all the arguments that Catholics have made in the past. They're not compelling. They're not compelling, right? No. So theoretically, what would compel you? What kind of evidence would compel you?
I don't understand paradigms, because there's not. If there was a compelling piece of evidence, I would have remained Roman Catholic, and I wouldn't have left Rome Catholicism.
No, I get you, Jay. You're saying that there is no evidence, but what I'm asking, my question is, what kind? Like, if we're in court and a lawyer is going off and he's saying, the evidence to the accused person is not sufficient. What you would need to prove is X, Y, Z. So
what
I'm asking,
I need is a consistent
evidence?
A consistent presentation for 2 millennia. That's what we need.
Okay, so for
doesn't
the first
he quote
10 centuries of the
Catholic
church,
sources and
you
then he
need
says,
absolutely
you can't quote
a perfect
Orthodox.
time.
Come on, man.
Every pope and every saint and every council.
No, didn't say that. A consistent presentation for the totality of Vatican I present for 2 millennia. That's what you need to prove.
Okay, so if we appeal, what could we appeal to then, theoretically speaking, in the first millennium? That would be a piece of evidence of that.
Hold on, Memento Mori, are you farting?
No.
Are going to be read
Why?
our paradigms. You see, we
Sounded
come from
like you were
paradigms.
farting.
I come from the Orthodox paradigm. You come from the Roman Catholic paradigm. That's why you see
It's okay if you
from
feel
history in a very different way from what I do.
No,
It's
that's
natural.
Classical foundationalist.
No, I didn't.
Both
That's
reading the same evidence from different paradigms. Now, that doesn't prove me right or you right or me wrong or you wrong. That's how I think all of this works. And that's why we have a much more circular type of epistemology, a coherence theory. And that's why ultimately I wanted to talk about epistemology, because when
Did you just hear what he said? Ramon, are you still here with us? Okay.
I'm still here, but I stopped listening. Well, I mean, I'm still listening, but only a little bit because Dyer's acting in a completely puerile manner.
Bro, he's been contradicting himself for like the past like 10-20 minutes where he just keeps on like doing a double standard, and then he says don't do this, and then he's just contradicting himself.
He just literally said, right, that his epistemology is a circular coherence theory.
Okay.
He just refuted himself.
When we have the office of the papacy, it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help us. It doesn't do the thing that it's supposed to do. And I truly genuinely think that it has arisen because of the Renaissance, because of the errors in divine simplicity, because of created grace and filioque. It gave rise to the Western doctrines and the trek of the West. And Gregory Palamas predicted that. You can reject what he says, but he said the West would become atheist if it went down that route. So I think that's a much better explanation.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at here, because I want to get to the epistemology thing, but what I'm trying to ask you, Jay, is you discounted all this evidence.
But
I'm
you
discounting it.
became
I said you're reading
Muslim.
into it from a Roman Catholic paradigm. I'm not discounting those.
I understand, but what I'm asking you is
Alhamdulillah.
what would qualify as a piece of evidence?
Do you understand that the way your system is structured, it's a
Oh,
totality view.
man.
It's not just about a specific piece of evidence that we find at this council or that council. This one. It's a whole perspective that includes all of these aspects of Vatican I and ordinary universal magisterium and ordinary magisterium and ex cathedra statements and Denzinger and history. All of these things go into what it is to be the papacy and to defend the papacy. All of that is part of it. It's a giant thing, and it's not just the first millennium. It's the whole package of 2 millennia and all of the things that have been happening past Vatican II. It's one big thing.
Talk about 2 millennia, man. That's a lot of stuff to talk about. That's why we're trying to get to what we originally were talking about and take our time.
But you have to defend Vatican I. That's
Okay, but we can get to that maybe on another day. Okay, but we're talking about a lot of things here. But we have to talk
I
about.
don't think these things operate. They don't operate on their own outside of a theory. They don't operate on their own outside of some holistic system. That's why we have two different views. You come from a classical foundational type of view. I think that would be the Roman Catholic view. We come from a more circular coherence type of view.
Okay, good. But you want to reach Roman Catholics. If I'm wrong, I want to be proven wrong. I want to know the truth. All I'm asking you is this: what would count as evidence of the papacy in the first millennium?
A coherent explanation of the doctrines of the papacy from the beginning all the way through to the present day.
So if we could give you five saints from each century that talk about the divine institution of the
Yeah,
papal
Ramon,
office,
sir,
would that
you
count?
I mean, you just
red pilled now on Vatican II.
But I'm
If I
asking.
admit to you that something evolves over time and that it becomes the papal view, then just returning it back and saying, well, but I can find
Watching
people
What?
who accept that.
No.
accept something like
I
that.
mean,
I understand because I'm not trying
Still
to prove
fully-
the view, Jay. All I'm
I
trying to get
see.
at is
You're not trying to prove the view.
I've been here for
Not
like a
right
minute
At
now.
this moment, I'm trying to ask you a specific question. I'm trying to ask because if we don't know what would constitute evidence, then you're not qualified to dismiss anything.
The evidences do not come pre-interpreted and neutral. Evidences are interpreted from a paradigm, from a worldview. All evidences are. Does
It's
that mean you
really
can't use evidence? No,
fast.
but it comes from a paradigm, and so that's why we have to look at presuppositions and worldviews
Yeah.
as a whole. That's why the Roman Catholicism is not
Has
just this piece
to.
of evidence and that piece of evidence. You
It's
stack
a
it
lot
up,
of
it's a good case.
information.
It's a paradigm. It's the whole thing. It's a whole kit and caboodle. It's a house of cards.
All right, we'll move on to the epistemic issue. But my conclusion on this here is that you can't even give us what would constitute evidence of the papacy in the
No,
first
you
place.
have the burden of proof because you believe that it's an infallible universal jurisdiction and it has to be the case from the
You
beginning.
can't even.
Yeah,
can't
But he
even
just
tell us,
admitted
though,
that
what
it's
would
his
constitute
worldview or
valid
his,
evidence. So you
he
can't
was
even
already
specify.
Do you want me to say for
circular.
the
So what do you
fifth
want
time?
about
We need to
it?
see a coherent presentation of
Right.
the Vatican I view from the beginning all the way to the present day post.
Okay, so we could probably get close to that, but that would take a long time. But that's
Okay,
good.
but you asked me what I expect. That's what's expected because extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence.
Okay.
And
now,
claims
do
of the
you think-
papacy are
Wait,
quite
didn't he make
do you think the
extraordinary
claims of
claims?
orthodoxy are extraordinary?
Well, if we mean extraordinary in the sense of supernatural, then yes. If you mean extraordinary in the sense of I'm supposed to accept that a guy praying in the mosque is still the representative vicar of Christ, then I mean in two different senses.
No, but what I'm asking you is this: do you think that Eastern Orthodoxy has extraordinary claims that would require a consistent, coherent argument from the beginning to the end?
Yeah, I believe in coherence theory that would apply to me and you.
Okay, so in other words, you believe that despite all these Eastern Orthodox saints teaching about the papacy, they still play a role in this.
We're not teaching papacy. That's, I mean, how many times do I have to say this? It's like
No, I mean,
are you like a program, a robot? I mean, how many times do I have to say this? That the fact that we have saints in the East who
It's so
saw the papacy as
disingenuous.
a thing that it could appeal to, and then over time this grew into a thing that we quit accepting, does not mean that it's true.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
What about
at
the
this point,
energy
I'm not sure what to say. I
distinction?
mean, you're saying that I'm
I've
required.
already answered this.
It's a separate convo. We can get into
I don't
that.
think it's fair.
We
because
will
you're saying
get
that
into
I'm
that.
required to give this perfectly
Is
consistent
that an
argument about the
evolution?
papacy.
No, it's
and then
system.
I'm
you're
gonna
not-
dedicate
you're not
these.
willing to
I'm gonna dedicate these next 2 weeks, Supreme, and we're just gonna completely dismantle Eastern Orthodoxy. I've made my decision
Yeah.
on this based on our conversation, yesterday and a couple days ago with fucking Boethius. I'm just gonna fucking go into it. We're going balls deep.
I mean, the
Okay.
Eastern Orthodoxy
Our
required to have
whole
the
system.
same.
You should talk to Aristotle.
We don't have a problem with
Aristotle's a
ours.
moron. I have him on tape.
So
the
does
system is built on one God.
Oh,
it has to be correct.
okay.
No.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it
I
does.
asked
You
what
should
would
talk
count
to
as
Jay
evidence. You said
Dyer.
a consistent
Paradigm.
coherent-
Yeah.
Yeah. But then
And
how
it's
was
not
there-
listen, Eric.
There's no need to. He's already made a fool of himself.
No,
Not
no, to make that the
inconsistent.
criteria of
No,
orthodoxy.
Jay
no,
Dyer
it's
is
not
too
inconsistent in a
emotional.
paradigm for saints and councils to be wrong. In your paradigm, it's
It's
wrong
also
for the
that way.
He
it's
is
possible
pretty
for the Pope to be
emotional.
wrong.
But here's what I'm saying, Jay.
Because your paradigm is built on one
Wait,
guy.
what
That's
about
Okay,
Ubi
but that's
though?
another research, and we haven't. I don't buy into that.
What do you
research.
think of him?
Yeah, so I watched the whole debate. He makes some good
Mhm.
points. They're kind of stuck into the whole weeds of like the historical facts of the matter. Ultimately, most people agree that Erick Ybarra won the debate. So,
Okay. Concerning
Listen,
the papacy, you mean?
Yeah.
But listen, look,
the
Jay,
foundation of the church.
Jay,
Your whole church is built on one guy.
Okay, Jay, you want your listeners to benefit. You want our listeners to benefit. We got to be able to dialogue here.
Yeah, but you're not listening.
You're saying that I'm required to have a perfectly consistent amount of
I'm saying
evidence
both of us
from
have the
beginning
same
to end.
requirement. We both have the same
Right.
requirement.
Okay, so are you willing to say that orthodoxy is perfectly coherent from the first century forward?
It's the most coherent, yes.
But you got to clean off all those saints that teach.
It's not inconsistent and incoherent with our view for people to make errors. We have many saints who make
Okay,
errors.
you're saying
But
that.
you just keep appealing to this as if this refuted the view. Because
Right.
our view is not built on one saint. Yours
Okay.
is. Your whole church is built on one guy being right. Ours is not.
Okay, hold on a second here, Jay. You said that I'm required to have a perfectly coherent evidence track record.
Your
from
objection
the
does not
century
mess up our position.
to now.
You don't
Yours,
understand.
and yours, and I'm asking you, does orthodoxy require the same criteria? You said yes.
Correct.
Okay, but then,
Your objection is not a violation of the criterion.
okay, but then you say that yes, we believe we have to have a coherent track record of evidence from the beginning.
It's not
to end.
incoherent in our view to have saints that made mistakes.
I'm getting to that.
It's
Jay.
incoherent in your view to have popes that are heretics.
Go
Okay,
ahead
good.
and let Eric finish though, because he's trying to make a point here.
Yeah, we got your point, Jay. We're picking up where you dropped this. There's a very good point you made. So let me summarize. I asked you what would constitute valid evidence of the papacy. You said a perfect track record from beginning to end.
I didn't say track record. I said a coherent presentation of the doctrine of Vatican I present from the beginning all the way to now.
Okay, that's an even better. That's an
It's
even better
very
summary.
clear.
Yeah, it's that's better summary than I could put it. So you said we need that in order to prove the papacy.
Correct.
I asked you, do you need that in order to show the veracity of orthodoxy?
Our worldview is not the same as yours epistemically.
I
You
understand, but this is yes or no. This is yes or no. You know, do
You
you?
have a coherent view, yes.
Okay,
Coherence does not mean that all the saints are in perfect agreement. It
I
does
got
not
you,
mean that they don't
but
make-
I'm agreeing with that, Jay. I'm not going against that. So let me talk. So you're saying you guys have that coherent, that consistent coherency all the way from beginning to end, because part of that coherency involves allowing some of these wear parts
Correct.
to break off, like Saint saying this, maybe wrong here, maybe wrong there. Why can't you pay the courtesy the same to us?
What do you mean?
I asked you what would be evidence of the papacy. You said the coherent,
Mhm.
continuous track record. Then I asked you, do you guys have this consistent, coherent presentation? You said yes. The part of your coherence involves allowing certain dross to be cleaned off.
Right.
Why can't you accord that to us, that we have some parts that need to be cleaned off?
Because of the nature of your system and how it differs from ours in its structure. and
Okay,
its
can you unpack that?
The system and the structure of the papacy includes and is built upon certain presuppositions and certain views
And what in particular?
that we cannot allow and that we cannot accept.
Okay, and okay, so just so we know we're on the same page here, you set the stage for you need a coherent presentation from beginning to end. You said orthodoxy has that presentation. I brought out that there's all these issues of errors in Orthodox history. You said that's fine because that's part of our
It's not built on one
that's
guy.
part of our structure.
No.
And then now we're at the point where we're asking you is if you can pay the courtesy to the Catholic that we also have the ability to tolerate certain weak points in our view. You're saying we don't have the
No,
tolerance.
because of the nature of the claims of Vatican I. That's
Okay,
why.
so,
It's a
so let's
double
go to that.
standard once again.
The Catholic can't tolerate
Yep.
certain moments
That's
of
what
heresy and error.
that's what
because
Ibarra is teasing
The
out right
claims
now
of Vatican
because
I
he's
are
pretty
so
much sick
expansive,
and
so
tired of
extensive, and so
Dyer
strong
at this
that they
point.
don't allow for the things that you
But
need.
Dyer has
Bro,
Ibarra has a lot of
And go ahead.
patience.
Unpack that a little bit more.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
he's
Vatican I is
based
not that long.
for
We can go and
that.
read it, but the claims of the special charism, the claim of the ordinary universal magisterium being
Bro,
also
I
part
think
of that charism,
it's,
the view
there's
that
no
everybody needs to be
point in
in unison
listening
with
to
the Roman
Jay,
Pontiff
bro.
to share in that
He's
jurisdiction, the
just
special privilege of the
nonsensical.
ordinary universal magisterium, the claims of the special infallible promise to only the see of Peter. All of those things are sort of bound up in the many claims. The Vatican I's not that long. It's just a few. It's like 10 pages of stuff like listed out what the actual statements of Vatican I are. All of those things are explicit. They're very clear. Vatican I actually makes classical foundationalist type statements about how we can verify these things from history. We can verify these things in the Bible. And I'm saying that 2 points. One, this doctrine is claimed to be true because of Matthew 16. And then at the same time, the claim is made that Matthew 16, we know that that's the Bible because of the popes and the later councils saying that that's the Bible. So that's a circular argument. That's my one problem with Vatican I starting off with, is that it's using a circular argument, which classical foundationalist epistemology does not allow for because it's built on self-evident maxims. Second is all of those statements about universality, jurisdiction, petrine promises, and the special role of Peter. So those are the two main foundational issues with Vatican I that I would say we have to, as Orthodox, disagree with. And not only that it has to be demonstrated that this was the case for 2 millennia. I'm not saying that you can't have people that made errors. I understand that John the 23rd made errors, right? And Roman Catholics admit that he said an error, and then it's, there's all the various different explanations about what John the 23rd was or wasn't saying. I don't really care about that. My point is just that the nature of those claims in Vatican I are so expansive and so extensive that number one, they don't comport with classical foundationalist epistemology, and number two, I don't think they can be sustained historically or biblically.
Okay, so let's get this on the level for the giraffes can get that. but let's
See,
get it down to
he
the level
tries
of
to
dogs.
play it off,
You're
and then
saying
he
that
goes
Vatican
back to
I
it.
teaches something that can't tolerate moments of time where a pope speaks error.
No, it says that the universal ordinary magisterium and the ordinary magisterium, right, and the ex cathedra magisterium are part of the petrine charism.
Where does it say that?
Oh, it's very clear in there. I'm glad you asked.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying here. That the ordinary magisterium and these other things that you had mentioned are part of the ex cathedra charism.
Well, let me be precise here. Universal ordinary magisterium is part of the petrine charism. Extraordinary magisterium is part of the petrine charism. Ordinary magisterium is to be followed with docility, but is not necessarily infallible unless it's in line with what's universal and extraordinary.
Okay, so you would admit then that there's an ordinariness to papal teaching that allows for errors.
What is allowed for error is when he is speaking as a private
See,
theologian.
now
or,
he's
ordinary
stuttering. He's
magisterium.
nervous.
And by the way, this is section 8 of Vatican I. It says, wherefore, by divine and Catholic faith, all of those things that are committed to be believed, which are contained in the Word of God, is found in Scripture and in tradition, which are proposed by the Church as matters to be believed and divinely revealed, whether by solemn judgment in her ordinary and universal magisterium. And it goes on to talk about extraordinary magisterium. In terms
Yeah, I mean, don't try to base your opinion, Luke, on, you know, your psychoanalysis or behavioral analysis of them. Try to keep it to what they're saying.
I try to keep it, but when Jay keeps on contradicting himself, that's why I throw his worldview out.
Just keep up track, right, of all the times and how he's actually contradicting himself.
Fair.
Like, and so, like, I think your good homework should be is read Aristotle's Rhetoric. I know you haven't had time to look at it yet, but
when it's universal, is infallible and protected as part of the Petrine charism. So that would be whenever the Pope is speaking or whenever anybody in the church is speaking, supposedly in unison with what's been the universal teaching of the church, right? Which kind of begs the question. But then it goes on to talk about the ex cathedra statements that are special and not typical, right? Or an ecumenical council, right? That would be extraordinary magisterium. But the universal ordinary magisterium is also part of the infallible protection and charism of Peter, according to section 8 of Vatican I. Now, what I'm saying then is that if we have that in our mind, then what we begin to understand is that you can't go through and pick out encyclicals as if they're teaching heresy and error. Now, the Pope could be theoretically be wrong in an encyclical here or there. He could write a book where he makes a mistake, and it wouldn't be necessarily a violation of the Petrine charism and the Roman Catholic view. But I think what's different here is that being a heretic or what we see after Vatican II, these are very different than being wrong theologically. These are bald-faced, continual obstinate teachings that are completely contrary to what was prior to Vatican II. And if we don't want to talk about Vatican II and after Vatican II, we can go back and we can find these examples of people who why was Pope Honorius not? Why was his teaching not under this ordinary universal magisterial protection?
Because he was a formal heretic, and he was an
universal and ordinary magisterium is
on the contrary, he wasn't. People just misunderstood him.
Were you here yesterday when we went over? I don't think you were, Ramon. He was a formal heretic.
Not.
He was a formal heretic.
But that is a legitimate.
Roman Catholics have tried, Roman theologians have tried to make this distinction between material formal heresy, and they haven't been able to establish it in the case of Pope Honorius. We can get, this is a separate conversation. We can spend some time to go into all of the things that they bring up here, and because it's going to be important, it's going to come up.
No, I was just saying that as a joke.
Oh.
I was just saying that as a joke. No.
Oh, my bad.
Because you know it's a position to say that he wasn't a heretic in the first place. Yeah,
but it's just that the facts are what they are. But again, some people try to maintain it, and it's I've read, there was a Jesuit theologian leading up to Vatican I that tried to make a case for it, and people like to claim like it made its way into Vatican I, but clearly it didn't, because what we ended up with was a very limited infallibility.
Where a pope speaks out of the ordinary, unless
the office and that person in the office are guided.
Yes, that's true. Yes, I agree with that. But I don't see what I've asked for there, which is Vatican I not allowing for moments of failure.
Because it's not about a matter of sin, if you mean by that failure, because we're not talking about making moral mistakes or Borgia.
No, I know.
Right, we're talking about heresy.
Yeah.
And that would be a violation of the Petrine promise, the charism of Peter, supposedly.
Right,
but because you were trying to make those statements about the letter of Pope St. Agatho to mean Vatican I, and it doesn't work because Pope Honorius is condemned at the Sixth Council.
Right, and like I said,
where was the Petrine charism with Honorius?
Well, Pope Honorius, that's a big. We can have a discussion on Pope Honorius.
Is the Petrine charism with Frank right now?
We would argue yes.
Right.
But let's go back to that Vatican I thing. So, you said in order for evidence of the papacy to exist in the first millennium, we have to have a coherent, consistent presentation of that doctrine. I asked you, does Orthodoxy have that? You said yes. Then you said we can withstand people speaking with failing here and there.
Correct.
I asked you if you could accord that to us.
Because of the nature of the claims.
You said no, and the reason that you're appealing to is Vatican I's decree, which says that the Pope is infallible when he teaches ex cathedra
and when he teaches in universal ordinary magisterium. That's not the ex cathedra.
Where does it say that?
Right, but the Vatican Council speaking about the universal and ordinary magisterium, that itself is an infallible agency. That's not a papal ex cathedra statement.
It doesn't matter. It's both under the charism of infallibility.
Right. So, but the universal ordinary magisterium is not truncated to the Pope's teaching.
Correct.
I'm
not saying it is. And the idea of Vatican I is that they're going to be in perfect harmony.
Right.
And I'm saying that they're not.
Right. So,
Jay Dyer's misquoting?
What do you think is the universal and ordinary?
What's that?
So Jay Dyer's misquoting on purpose?
Just follow the argument. Dude, this is the critical part. And you're allowing your head to get too distracted by your own thoughts about what's actually being said. Just try in your head to record what they're saying. So then you can recall it later when you start to ask the questions. You get what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Sorry, that's how
You're
my brain
young.
works
It's
sometimes.
okay, Luke. You're young. Um, you're still barely out of high school, so it's okay. I'm trying to give you maybe some like tips on
Mm.
just how to absorb that information like quickly. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You you're
All right.
you're asking all the right questions. You truly
Mm.
are. I'm gonna rewind just a little bit.
All right.
Both under the carries of Peter and infallibility.
Right. So, but the universal ordinary magisterium is not truncated to the Pope's teaching.
I'm not saying that it is. But the idea of Vatican I is that they're going to be in perfect harmony.
Right.
And I'm saying that they're not.
Right. So what? And you're okay. So let's define here. What do you think is the universal and ordinary magisterium? And has there ever been an example of that?
Has there ever been an example? It's supposedly the normative universal teaching of the church, which is whenever it's in line with tradition and what the previous popes have taught. Which, by the way, begs the question because it just assumes that you're going to know what that is. So now we don't just have ex cathedra statements of the Pope. We also have the ordinary universal magisterium. Which, how do we exactly parcel this out as individual Catholics? It seems to require quite a bit of reading and research. So are we really in a better position than anybody else with the office of the papacy?
Okay, I mean, we can get to that. We can get to that. But I'm still trying to find out why I, as a Catholic, can't withstand certain doctrinal failures.
Because it's not a matter of doctrinal error or mistakes. It's about heretics and the loss of the Petrine charism. Do you think that a pope can lose the Petrine charism? So now we're into, that's what I'm saying is this reduces to absurdity. We're having to debate the kind of stuff that Bellarmine was debating about can a pope be a heretic or not and all this stuff. And the nature of this system, all it requires is one example of somebody not being consistent.
Yes, I would
theologically.
I would agree with you, Jay, that it would take if a pope or an ecumenical council under a pope were ever to enact a decree, which is a heresy in conflict with the past.
Correct. Vatican II.
Then you would have found a falsification point.
There we go.
We agree on that.
Yeah, so, Vatican II contradicts Mortalium Animos.
Okay, but we're talking about theory first here. Okay.
You said all I needed was one example. There you go.
Okay, but we're talking about theory here because before you were saying that we can't withstand any failures.
No, I said specifically about the doctrine of Vatican I. I didn't say any failures. I said you need to prove Vatican I from the beginning, and you can't.
And what is Vatican I then that you're asking me to prove?
I just read it to you. How many times do I have to read what it says?
But I'm familiar with the history of the church, and I don't know of any popes coming out in the first millennium. And
it doesn't have to be the first millennium. You have a claim about 2 millennia. I don't care that it's about the first or the second millennium. All I have to find is one example. Mortalium Animos says that participation in pan-religious ceremonies are apostasy and indifferentism. That's all I need. That's one example. It's the most clear. That's all I need. Right. Your popes have done it for 7 years. That's it. That's it. Okay, that's my last argument. I don't even have any more arguments. So if you want to spend the next 5 years with casuistry trying to defend those actions, you go for it.
Okay, but we went from the 4th century, and we're talking about the first.
But it's because it's about a paradigm. It's not just about the 4th century.
Okay, but in the dialogue between East and West, we talk about the first millennium and what was there. Because look, if I'm going to become an Eastern Orthodox Christian, I don't want anybody in the first millennium teaching anything remotely Roman Catholic as a distinctive teaching.
No, we don't have a problem with people making errors. So if you listen, Eric, you can read Roman Catholic presuppositions into Orthodoxy all day long, and it's not going to hurt our view. All I have to do is find one example of it, because our view is not built on single guys. Yours is.
So, but okay, so then the claim would be that we have violated Vatican I because a pope has taught heresy at an extraordinary level.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, and you and I would agree on the level of theory with that.
Yeah, and I tried I know the Vatican II arguments. I've heard them all. I know them all. Okay. I tried to make we've been misinterpreted. The liberals have hijacked it. I know all this stuff.
Okay, but I think we're agreeing here now. So you say that in order to prove Vatican I, we have to have a coherent presentation of it.
You said all I need was one example in theory.
Right, and I agree with that. Okay, but that's a separate question. Did that actually teach heresy? That's a separate question. But you're conceding that we can withhold and tolerate failures as long as they don't meet the conditions of universal and ordinary or papal ex cathedra teaching.
I'm saying in your system, yeah, you would have to, but that's not all that's involved in these claims, you see.
Okay, but I just want to make sure, because I think we came to an agreement here.
Well, that's one part. Yeah. If you can demonstrate that has always been believed and is true, then absolutely, you might have an argument. But all I need is one example to prove it false. Because
I'm not saying we agree on like whether Catholicism or Orthodoxy is false. But what I'm saying is we reached an agreement where, you said the only thing that's admissible as evidence for Catholicism is a coherent, consistent presentation of Vatican I. You said that the same would apply to Orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. Then when somebody says, yeah, but you've got all these saints in Orthodoxy and these councils saying this and that, then you respond and say,
the claims of
here it is.
That doesn't subtract or violate our coherency.
It does.
Then I asked you if you could allow the Catholic to tolerate certain failures, and then you said at first no. But then we went to Vatican I, and you clearly saw that
you're trying to equate our mistakes. You're not understanding two different paradigms. This is what you don't get. You're trying to equate the mistakes in our saints with the mistakes in your popes, and they don't equate. They're two different systems. You have a different system than us because it's not the same. You're trying to say that our view of the saints has to somehow be equated to your view of the papacy, and why can't you allow the popes made errors? Because the claims of Vatican I and the papacy, and it's not just about ordinary universal magisterium. It's also the other claims that I told you a minute ago about the special promises to Peter, the jurisdiction that was supposedly given to Peter that's universal. It's also about the temporal claims of the papacy. That just because they're not mentioned in Vatican I doesn't mean that they weren't there all throughout the Middle Ages. It's all that stuff. It's one package that you have to be this litigator, lawyer trying to defend. And I'm saying, no, you can't do that. And when you say, well, why can't you give me these benefit of that? Because they disprove your system because it's a total system. It's a totality type of claim. And saying that we have saints, admitting that we have saints that made errors does not affect the paradigm that we have. It's part of our paradigm.
But not just saints, also councils.
Correct. There are false councils, Eric.
No, but I'm talking about councils that are accepted.
There are councils that are accepted to have false canons, as you admit.
Yes, I understand that. But
our system is not built on that. Yours is. That's the paradigm that you come from.
Yeah, but I would say that we can
Okay,
tolerate
I know you're gonna say.
doctrinal failures that are not on the condition of universal, ordinary, or on the level of papal.
Okay, but Honorius is universally condemned at
But I would say that if we did have an instance of a council teaching error,
yeah, Vatican I versus Mortalium Animos. There's your example.
that's a separate question. So
Yeah,
I
of
think
course
you
it is a
and I-
separate question. You asked for one example. There's an example. Oh, now it's a separate question.
Okay, so but in the first millennium, you said we need
we're
a
talking about
presentation, and I think
I
that
gotta go, dude. I don't have time. I don't have time to keep going.
I mean we can move on to the epistemology issue if you want, but I mean, you know, if you want to move on to something else,
Let's
but
set up an epistemology debate after the Dillahunty debate. I've got to debate Matt Dillahunty and all that stuff. So we can do the epistemology question
I
later.
mean, but is it something you really want to do? Because it doesn't seem like you want to really debate. I mean, it seems like this is like a dead horse to you.
No, I mean, it seems like a circle to me. So
Well, you know, I mean, I think you need to see that I want your help. If you got it, if you want to show that I'm wrong, you know,
I'm dubious of that, honestly.
well, you know, I don't know what else to say. I mean,
I guess for the sake of the audience, yeah, I would be glad to argue with you about the epistemology, because that's the central issue where we're going to have disagreements and approaches on these questions, and I think that it's very easy to refute classical foundationalism.
Okay, so you know, I just want to wrap up here. Then I guess in a summary form, that you know we can appeal to Eastern Orthodox saints, we can appeal to Eastern Orthodox popes, we can appeal to councils, we can appeal to all these things that show a clear and consistent teaching that there is a divine investiture in the Roman See because of our Lord and what He gave to Saint Peter. But that could all be negligible. It could all be negligible because the Orthodox paradigm can tolerate that kind of falsehood, truth, falsehood, truth, falsehood.
In other words, we're not papists. Exactly.
Right. So, but when Catholics are required to show our case, we can't even have one moral failure, one doctrinal failure.
Nope, because of the nature of your claims.
On the level
why you're
outside those conditions of infallible modes of teaching. But I think that everybody who knows Vatican I knows that there are fallible modes and infallible modes. But then Jay said, but there has been an infallible mode where you guys have proven yourself false. So that would be another debate question.
So there is Mortalium Animos in the chat. That is, I would think,
Hey, Bubba.
magisterial teaching from Pius XI,
What's up?
28. And it calls all of the Assisi type meetings, the Assisi prayer meetings, the synagogue meetings, the prayer in the mosques toward Mecca. It calls that apostasy and indifferentism. And I would say
Can
that,
you
that
hear me?
means that those people are not.
Yeah, just chilling at home today.
We should not be in communion with them.
Oh, it's Matt.
I'm not saying that means that you all have no. At all.
Yeah,
You guys are
well,
patient with us, but I think
me
that
and my
we
wife
have
have
a duty to
had
not
New
be
Year's
communicating
with, sorry, we
for
had
about
Christmas
a
with
year,
my
9 months,
family and her
6 to 7
family.
years. So,
We
that's all I
had
want.
Thanksgiving with my
But
family and her family.
here. You know,
We had
for me as a Roman
Halloween at
Catholic,
my
I'm gonna go to
family.
the first millennium
So
to
we're
say,
just
hey,
chilling
you
for
know,
New
I want
Year's.
to know if there's evidence for Eastern Orthodoxy in the first 10 centuries.
Sounds
And I find
nice.
all these admissions to papal supremacy, papal
Ouch.
What
infallibility.
time's
You know-
I have to say, you know what?
You know what they're watching?
I'm just going to neglect all that because
7 is the answer.
there's a lot
There-
of falsehood. There's
last
a lot
time
of
I
truth,
checked-
and I just got to go with
Last time I
truth.
checked on them,
Yeah,
they
that's
were
part of it.
watching
Yeah,
Guys,
so if I'm
Arianism
inquiring into
You already
equals
admitted that
Islam.
the church fathers and saints and even councils make errors.
Oh.
You already admitted that. And now you're saying, well, but
what
if
is
I'm going to
true
show
about
that.
them? So what is true about them then?
Yeah, so this is where it
I
gets
was
to
like,
the issue.
dude,
No
who's
way
the
to
guy
solve
with
this
the
issue apart
big
from
fat
individuals trying
head?
to know what's
Holy
true and an
cow.
aspect of reception theory. This is why
That's
the Holy
me.
Spirit was given to the church. This is why Roman Catholicism
Ain't no
didn't
way.
No,
Ain't no way
Well,
you're
no,
talking.
You replaced him with the person of the Pope.
Well, look, Catholics believe in first.
No, the
God,
guy
where
in
it
the
says we don't know
stream.
Jesus, right?
The
We
guy with
believe
the
that.
fat
We
head.
believe that there's a sense in which
That
each
guy's the
individual
Chad.
is illumined by the Holy Spirit and does not need.
I know you admit that, right?
Okay,
That
right,
guy's
we
the
believe that.
Chad.
Now, does that
Mhm.
negate the divine function
I'm
of
gonna
a visible societal church
Supreme.
that
You
has
can't hear me.
magisterial
I was
authority?
gonna tell
Well,
Supreme
we'll
I'm gonna
find from the
upload
Bible and
my
going forward.
debate
That's
with
not the case
Nick.
because
I've already argued this.
right at the Council of Acts, in the Council of Acts 15, right?
Where Peter does not preside.
Right.
And
You
they
have all
should-
these
Bubba, you
Christians who are
debate
noose
Nick
enlightened Christians,
Fuentes?
right?
You
And they're
debated Nick
disputing about the
Fuentes.
circumcision deal.
Fuck no.
Did they just ask Peter?
No, but
I'm not really.
I'm
I'm
not
not
trying to
a
get to it.
political
But
person.
Here's the
If
churches
I
governed- our church has been
was
governed synodally.
this isn't a
updated like
political issue. The question
daily
is,
on
did those
politics,
individuals who were disputing the
so I can
circumcision
kind of
debate,
gather
It's not
my
based
own
on Peter, it's
evidence
based
and
on synod.
conclusions,
Do you
then
agree that the Holy-
I
was
would.
their noose,
It
was
just
their
doesn't
noose illumined
interest
by the
me
uncreated
very
energies?
much.
yes, the means that the
Okay,
Holy
so why
Spirit.
did they bring the dispute to the
I
council?
would
The means that the
probably
Holy
be
Spirit
pretty
gives
good
to
at it,
enlighten
but
people
I'm just
are
not.
external, juridical types of things like synods and
Fair,
councils. We don't.
Okay, good.
We don't have a dialectic. We don't have a dialectic.
Right, so we agree on that though. So
Let's
you believe,
like
you
I
believe
just started debating George
Hold on a
Floyd.
second.
That was
Hold on a
4
second.
years
I know
ago.
you claim that, but the claim is that you're inconsistent. because
Okay,
you
I
claim to be-
understand, but I'm trying to explain to you why maybe I am consistent, and then you can show me why I'm not consistent. And we could do that
So what do
calmly
you mean,
and peacefully. What I'm saying is that
Me
you
and Nick
believe
did
that
what
individuals
exactly?
can be enlightened, their noose illumined by the divine
Matt,
light,
mute
and
yourself.
can know the truth individually.
Why
But then you
happened?
said, and you admitted,
I can
that
hear
Christ
myself
established a
like
visible church
bar
with
for
a
bar.
juridical synodal structure.
I mean, you don't have to repeat arguments that I've been.
It's like the
making for
worst.
years.
It's
So-
like the
so
worst
now you're
echo
gonna
I
say-
ever
you're gonna
heard.
say, so why can't you say?
I think it's
why not
okay
have
now.
An
I
extra
don't
level
know.
of the Pope to solve
But-
when there's a dispute.
Bubba,
No,
you
I'm
got
not
a
getting there
block
yet.
of
And I know,
cheese?
that's not going to work with the neutral
Cheese.
requirement, okay? But what I'm telling you is this: you yourself already have a paradigm epistemically that admits the individual enlightenment and certainty,
I bet
and
you your
a
jokes
visible,
are cheesy as
principled,
well.
juridical, and
Are we good
synodal
now?
paradigm. Okay, so already you and I have a
Blah, blah,
similar
blah, blah, blah,
epistemology
blah.
in the fact that
Yeah.
we both admit
No, we don't.
that an individual can know certain truth just by the Holy Spirit in them.
Because your church does not believe in the
Yeah,
doctrine
you
of
get it.
universal, so the individual does not have an unlike nous. We have a completely different view of human anthropology. Secondly, the way that Roman Catholicism says that we
What did
know
we
what's
talk
true,
about? I forgot.
again,
We
goes
talked
back to
about
not just the councils and not reading the
deism.
Bible, but ultimately the decision of Peter. And so it's a circle. Your
That's
system,
not what we teach.
yes, it is. You believe that the Bible is what yes, you do. The basis
So
for
what's
patron
scripture?
authority is
What's
Matthew
that?
16. Matthew 16 is known on the basis of the popes deciding what the canon is, supposedly.
And did you?
Unnecessary.
So Ramon, I don't know if you're still there, but if you got it right, Now Jay
Mhm.
Dyer, his whole cards are out now. Now he's saying that he believes our epistemology is circular because our foundational assumption is based on the scripture, which is a circle. That's
Oh
why
god.
at the beginning of this, right, he thinks that we're just going to default to the keys of the kingdom and not canon number 6, right? But that's because Erick Ybarra already tried to address his interpretation of canon number 6, but you can see how like willfully blind Jay Dyer is of the interpretation of, he's still running with that non sequitur this whole
Yeah,
fucking
Yeah.
time. And then
yeah,
at the
and
end
then
of the
Jay Dyer
day, he goes, your epistemology can't stand on its own because it's a circular argument based on Matthew 16.
Yeah, and then from
Now the
there,
devil's out.
yeah, and then
That's the
from
Roman
there,
Catholic argument.
Jay
That's a
Dyer
circle.
makes the
Now,
argument
here's
saying,
my-
"Oh, nah, your entire worldview is my entire worldview is circular as well." So then he's just contradicting himself.
Oh, you gotta allow the Catholic to
You
speak
know
about
that's
it.
your position.
What I'm trying to tell
Is
you
that
here-
your position?
What I'm trying to tell you here is that we have a paradigm where an individual can be filled with the Holy Spirit, irrespective of Peter, irrespective of the Pope, irrespective of councils, to know Jesus Christ and to know with certainty the gospel. We believe that.
That's not true. You're lying.
Really? We have,
Because your council says the way that you know what's true is by the decision of the See of Peter, and the See of Peter is based on Matthew 16:18.
there's nowhere in the Council of the Vatican where it says
Yes,
we
it
don't
is.
know.
Yes, it absolutely does. The beginning of the council talks about
Oh.
knowing what's true religiously and theologically, and it says that God established the office of Peter so that the church would know with certainty what the doctrines from God are.
Okay, but what you're saying there in summary form, okay, is slightly different because what our claim is, while we do have the possibility of
For some
uncertainty as an
reason, I'm
individual,
not sure if it's just
God has
because my
created a
storage is getting
magisterium to cover up loose
too
ends
full,
when things are not perfect. And you would admit that at the Council of Jerusalem,
but my
all these
frame
loose
rate
enlightened Christians who were
on
disputing about
the
the services
video
bill
with
could
Nick
use the help of an
was
ecumenical council.
horrible.
It wasn't
It was
ecumenical
like
council. It was
10
local
frames a
Jerusalem,
minute.
not presided over by Peter, but
Synod in
presided over by James.
Until
Of the
the
Synod in Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's why the
I,
Orthodox
I
Church has
don't know
always been
why,
synodally. For
but
300 years, when
on the
there
other
was a
2 or 3
Nicaea,
videos that I
there was local
recorded
synods,
before
and we
that,
still
it
have
was
local synods.
totally
That's why we're
fine.
still here. We
I
got the Pope.
understand, but I'm on a different sheet of music here, Jay. What I'm saying, do you believe that the Council of Jerusalem helped the Christians?
Of course.
Was
Now
it a
why?
huge
All the
file?
Moses would have had perfect certainty of the issue.
It
You're
was
not
a
listening. You're
no,
a
it was only a
dialectical idiot.
16-minute
just
video,
told
and I
you
had
that
just
we believe.
recorded.
I just told you.
I went
Wait,
into
because I just told you that we
agnostic
believe
one's
in
call,
You've
and
insulted me.
I did fine.
You're
Like the video was 40 minutes, so it was
You've
fine.
insulted me. I'm not going to continue.
Well, you deserve to be insulted. You're an idiot.
Jay, let me jump in here. There's really no need for any of that. Just stick to the objective issues. No need to start addressing him as an individual. That's
Yeah,
entirely
but
valid.
if this is about the 20th
Oh,
time in this
big
discussion
man.
where I make a statement and
That's fine.
I
Be
also
patient
like
with it. You don't have
filmed.
to antagonize me
I
individually, so be
recorded
patient with
a
me.
debate with
Just do it
Nyarlath
the
right
other-
before
I don't
that,
think I have
and
not thought he's a good.
I
active,
haven't
honest
looked at it yet,
individual
but
this
I
whole time.
think
Still
it's
be
fine.
asking personal opinions about him to decide and deal with this issue objectively.
Well, I'm going to call him out if I don't think he's being honest.
Well,
Okay,
okay,
Gonna
you don't have
lock
to
in
do it
this
by
year and
coercion.
work
That's
out?
I'm going to state this very clearly.
I do. I work
When we
out
say
now,
that
you
the Holy
dick.
Spirit uses means, that's not in contrast to our doctrine of
You
the
didn't
Holy
know. You don't
Spirit.
notice.
Clearly
because we don't
not
think
hard
that it's
enough.
individual and
Clearly
God is
not
not
hard
It has
enough.
nothing to do with what's around you. We
I
believe
used to
in
be
the
way more
statement
into it
that
than I
God
am
uses
now. I'll
created
say
means
that
to
much.
transfer uncreated grace. That's
What's
the
up,
sacrament of
Bubba,
the
my
Holy Spirit,
favorite atheist?
uncreated energy of Christ. That's the way Ephesus describes it. Right? So for us, there's no tension between the uncreated and the created. They're in harmony. The uncreated interpenetrates, just like in Christology, right? In Christ, in the
Neil.
incarnation, the uncreated energies interpenetrate his humanity according to the Sixth Council, according to Maximus, according to the So in the
It's
same way,
not
for us as
Neil.
individuals, we do believe that the individual has the ability to see those truths through the means that the Holy Spirit has ordained, which is the ecumenical, universal, the one holy Catholic and apostolic church. So absolutely, we fully believe in both of those things being true at once, and we don't put them in a dialectical either or tension. But that's precisely why we don't think we need the office of the Pope, because he comes up as an epistemic, juridical attempt to try to solve an epistemological problem.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I'll
no,
just say he's an
I don't know,
emotional guy.
The issue
He's
that we're
an
dealing with
emotional
here
guy.
is
So
very clearly stated by me, and I haven't heard anything to respond to what I'm saying. The Council of Jerusalem was a synod. It was a juridical synod. Jay admitted that it helped the Christians. Why would it help the
Do you not
Christians?
listen to what I just said?
Because you're admitting what I'm saying. You're admitting exactly what I'm saying. But you don't accrue that. You don't allow that for the Catholic.
He's
and for no
muted.
reason. There's no.
No, because you're misunderstanding that our critique is not that you don't say true things at certain times. I know that there are statements where, for example, you can find statements where condemnations and densing are said to be for the enlightenment of every individual Catholic, right? So there's the tacit acknowledgement that yes, the faithful can know the doctrines and can know the theology. I'm pointing out a contradiction between that, and that is a correct view, and the other view, which says that what Vatican I, the way it words it in a classical foundationalist type perspective, and it says that the way that we can know truth about God is because God ordained the See of Peter. It's very clear. It's not. It makes no bones about it. No, and that's why we don't have the same. We don't have the same anthropology.
And there's not a single difference between that.
Yes, there is.
Now he says he goes from we don't have the same worldview or epistemology, and now we don't have the same anthropology. Ramon, you getting it now? So they don't. So Jay Dyer and the Dyerites view it's not just an epistemological issue. They don't believe that we have the same human nature as them, or our view of human nature isn't even the same. This is crazy. These are some bold ass freaking claims, and this guy has the temerity to continue to call himself a Christian.
Excuse me, that they don't have the
Orthodox who
same
says-
human nature. Excuse me?
No. Okay. Rather, he's saying that we don't have the same anthropology, which means that he doesn't think that his claim. He's also admitting to the case that we don't have the same view of human nature.
Bruh.
How can you maintain that and also call yourself a Christian?
No
that
Catholic
we can have
or
our own
Orthodox
noose
would
enlightened
deny
certainty of
that.
truth through the means of juridical.
Because we're not classical
About the same
foundationalists. You know what that
nature.
means?
You're admitting that a noose
Except
enlightened
this
Christian
guy.
can come to be enlightened through juridical synods.
Correct.
Yeah, but you don't want to admit that the same could happen with the Catholic.
Because you don't believe in the news.
But it doesn't matter. Just certainty.
It does matter.
Just certainty.
That's the way that you know God directly. That's why it matters. That's why your church doesn't have it. You only believe in
Abysmal,
the
how
God who
old's the
created events.
video?
Okay, that's a separate discussion. What we're talking about
No, it's
here
not
is-
separate. That's
you're
this is what
saying
you do. Every time you get nailed down on something, you say, "Don't bring in that other thing because it's part of the problem here."
no, it's not part of the problem
It is
because
part of the
the issue that
This part of the conversation, I know Supreme, you asked about Energeia, right? What is this whole theology about? I'm going to prepare some videos and some documentation that we can take a look, some secondary sources about their theology from Gregory of Palamas. Okay, I will prepare that for you. We're going to go through, again, these next 2 weeks. This is all we're going to focus on.
Hold on, my internet's terrible.
Yeah, well, I
I'm
mean,
getting at here
Abysmal,
is the firm's
really quickly.